Ready?
Good evening. My name is James Kane, and I have the distinct honor to serve as your town moderator for the annual town meeting. Will you please rise and join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, and liberty and justice for all. As is our tradition, please remain standing while we recognize the service of Bonnie E. Gibbs, who passed away on December 8, 2023, having served as a town meeting member from the year 2000 through 2020. Please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. Good evening and welcome to our annual town meeting. To ensure good orders, tellers, please raise your hand so that all town meeting members can see you. All town meeting members should have their stickers clearly displayed so that all can see. Town meeting members are asked to sit on this side of the tellers. Only town meeting members should be on this side of the tellers unless they have been provided specific permission by the moderator. Residents wishing to witness this evening are asked to sit toward the rear. All department heads are asked to sit to my lower left so as to be in a convenient location to answer any questions if one is asked. By way of reminder, our town meeting has a long and proud tradition of civil discourse and orderly debate. No outbursts in support or opposition of a member's comments or vote outcome are allowed. Furthermore, when one wishes to be recognized, please wait for my clear recognition and proceed to a microphone. If you are unable to move to a microphone, one will be brought to you. Once at your microphone, please clearly state your name and precinct and then proceed with your question. Also this evening, please keep in mind that we are having closed caption. So if you can be particularly clear with your question, it would be greatly appreciated. In order to ensure that all of your colleagues have the opportunity to speak, please limit your initial question to one question with a follow-up. Rest assured you'll have a chance to ask any other follow-ups. At this time, I'd like to recognize those to my left and right. To my right, Town Clerk Sharon Thomas and Town Council Stephen Medaus. Further to my right is our Finance Committee, chaired by Vikram. I will now ask him to introduce his colleagues.
Moderator, thank you. I would like to introduce myself, Vikram Chabra, Chair of the Committee, Dennis O'Connell, Vice Chair, James Flynn, Clerk. In the order to the right of Mr. Flynn are Rajesh Velagapudi, Jean Budenhagen, Lena Polito, and down on the floor are Diana Bowley and Brian Ganger.
Town Manager Kevin Mizikar, Chair of the Board of Selectmen John Samia, who I'll ask to introduce his colleagues.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. My name's John Samia, and I'm the chair of the Select Board. On my left is Teresa Flynn, Vice Chair. Sitting down facing town meeting in front of the stage, going from your right to left, are Clerk Michelle Conlon and members Beth Cassavant and Carlos Garcia. Thank you.
Thank you very much. With the introductions complete, let's get underway. Our town meeting operates under the laws of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, the bylaws of the town of Shrewsbury, and town meeting time. I have examined the warrant and the constable's return of service, and both are in order. I ask for unanimous consent to dispense with the reading of the warrant and the constable's return. Hearing no objections, it's voted unanimously. To the town meeting warrant, each of you should have picked up a report of the bundling articles. Please recall that all bundling allows for one vote on items covered. If any town meeting member has a question regarding any bundled item, simply ask as we walk through each article. As we walk through the warrant, I will call the article. The chair and vice chair of the select board will move the printed motion and second it. I will then ask the Finance Committee for a recommendation. Mr. Mizikar will then provide a crisp and succinct description of the article. Article 1.
I move the printed motion under Article 1.
Second?
Second.
Mr. LeBeau, would you please come forward and provide your colleagues with an update?
Mr. Moderator, I ask that my fellow members of 300
Of course.
any members of the committee who are here tonight everybody.
Hi.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Good evening, town meeting. My name is John LeBeau. The town of Shrewsbury was established December 15th, 1727. To begin the commemoration, the Select Board established the 9-member 300th Anniversary Celebration Committee on November 28th, 2023. At that November meeting, the Select Board created its charge to the committee and established our mission: to research, evaluate, make recommendations, and coordinate the town-wide activities to commemorate the 300th anniversary of the incorporation of the town of Shrewsbury in 2027. The charge also requires that the committee shall hold a minimum of 3 community meetings to solicit public comment within the first 18 months of the committee's formation. The Select Board made its appointments on February 13th of this year and appointed Gail S. Lanian, Patricia Servo, James Jolliker, John LeBeau, Carol Ann McAdam, Moira Miller, Melanie Petrucci, Anand Sharma, and Nicole Torres, all to 2-year terms set to expire on June 30th, 2026. The 300th Anniversary Celebration Committee has met 3 times since it was established. On March 28th, we held an introductory meeting at which time Select Board Chair Cassavant, Town Manager Mizikar, and Assistant to Town Manager Dobson reviewed the committee's charge and public meeting procedures with us. At our second meeting on April 10th, the committee organized, electing me as chair, Nicole Torres as vice chair, and Melanie Petrucci as clerk. And we began our work. We started to create a database of organizations and institutions we'd like to contact and potentially involve in the process. The committee also agreed at that April 10th meeting that its initial inclination is that the anniversary celebration will consist of several events spread through 2027, not just one large singular event, and also that community groups will be strongly encouraged to sponsor whatever events they see fit in conjunction with the celebration and to coordinate them with the committee. We also started to review materials from previous Shrewsbury anniversary celebrations. Our third meeting was last Monday on the 13th, at which time we determined we'd begin to contact other towns that are in a similar window as ours, with anniversaries between 2024 and 2027, and we continued our analysis of previous Shrewsbury celebrations. Our next meeting is June the 12th. We are thinking that the second Monday of the month will be our standard meeting date. Excuse me? What did I say? Wednesday. The second Wednesday of the month. That's why we have a good board here. The best means to contact the committee is through our email, which is 300th300th@shrewsburyma.gov. Development of a logo and website and a social media presence are high priorities and are under development. We are being supported by the very talented town hall staff, but should there be any public-minded professional graphic designers, website and social media creators who'd be willing to donate some of their time and expertise, we'd love to speak with you. That request for assistance from the community is our very first one. There will be many more to follow, I assure you. I emphasize that this celebration's success is completely dependent on the community's willingness to support it. I assure you the 300th Anniversary Celebration Committee will work very hard to provide the town with the best celebration possible at the level that the community wants it to be. We will need both financial support and people willing to roll up their sleeves, get involved, and do some real work. Upon review of the souvenir program for the town's 250th anniversary, I noted that there were well over 300 townspeople identified who worked on that celebration. Our predecessors set a very high bar for us. Mr. Moderator, that concludes the committee's report. Thanks to you and to the town meeting for your kind attention.
Thank you, Mr. LeBeau, and the entire committee. All those in favor of receiving the report shall signify by saying aye. All those opposed, nay. We are unanimous. Article 2,
Printed motion under Article 2.
Second.
Finance Committee.
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee recommends Article 2 by a vote of 9-0.
Mr. Mizikar.
This article proposes to deposit $10,000 into the 300th Centennial Celebration Fund. This will provide the committee with funding which will supplement any anticipated donations.
Any comments or questions with reference to Article 2? Not seeing or hearing any. All those in favor shall signify by saying aye. All those opposed, no. We are unanimous. Article 3,
Move the printed motion under Article 3.
Second.
Finance Committee.
Finance Committee recommends the passage of Article 3 by a vote of 9-0.
Mr. Mizikar.
This is a standing article to appoint the trustees of the Wright and Harlow Charitable Trust Fund. The terms of the trust, which were established in 1882, require this action by town meeting annually.
Other comments or questions with reference to Article 3? Not hearing or seeing any. All those in favor shall signify by saying aye. All those opposed, no. It's unanimous. We will now move to Bundle 4, Articles 4 and 5.
Printed motion under Articles 4 and 5.
Second.
Finance Committee.
Mr. Moderator, Finance Committee recommends defeat of both Article 4 and Article 5 by a vote of 7-0.
Mr. Mizikar.
These articles are placed on the warrant to manage financial adjustments of prior years and the current fiscal year respectively. No actions are necessary, and thus both articles should be defeated.
Thank you. Comments or questions with reference to Bundle 4, Article 4 and Article 5? Not hearing or seeing any. All those in favor shall signify by saying aye. All those opposed, no. There we go. Bundle 5, Article 6.
I move the printed motion under Article 6.
Second.
Finance Committee.
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee recommends Article 6 by a vote of 9-0.
Mr. Mizikar.
This article proposes to deposit $1,273,213 into the Special Purpose Override Stabilization Fund. These funds will be reserved for future appropriation by town meeting to fund the operations of municipal and educational departments, as well as shared operating support expenses of the various departments. The use of this special fund is the centerpiece of the commitment of the Select Board and the School Committee to the town in prolonging the duration of the funds raised from the approved override of May 4th, 2021. The current balance of the Override Stabilization Fund as of May 16th, 2024 is $7,798,083.74. The revised balance of, if this article is approved, would be $9,071,296, or 5.9% of the proposed budget found in Article 7.
Thank you. Comments or questions with reference to Article 6? Not hearing or seeing anyone, requiring a simple majority. All those in favor of Article 6 shall signify by saying aye. All those opposed? No. Okay, it passes. We will now move to Article 7, which is the operating budget.
I move the printed motion under Article 7.
Second.
Finance Committee.
Mr. Moderator, Finance Committee recommends passage of Article 7 by a vote of 9-0. Apologies.
Thank you very much. Mr. Mizikar.
This article seeks to establish the annual operating budget for municipal and education departments for fiscal year that will start on July 1st, 2024. This article seeks an appropriation totaling $152,590,669. Funding for this article is raised from a number of sources, including taxation, utility revenues, and funded through CELCO. Utility operating budgets are rate funded and will be reviewed in separate articles later this evening. The fiscal year 25 operating budget is a 4.6% increase or $6,717,870 over the current year's budget. Of this total, municipal operations, debt service, and certain expenses in support of the school and town make up 43.3%, or $66,075,149. 56.7%, or $86,515,520 is allocated for the school department. This is a balanced budget and is funded through recurring revenues. Recurring revenues exceed annual operating expenditures as proposed for the fourth consecutive year. With the deposit of those excess revenues into the override stabilization account through the previous article, those funds can be relied upon to ease future tax increases associated with the operating budget. Finally, I'd like to highlight the notable changes in the municipal shared operating support and debt service in comparison to the current fiscal year. Municipal departmental budgets will increase by $1,619,256. These funds cover the cost of continuing to provide the same services next fiscal year and very modest increases as prioritized and aligned with the 2030 strategic plan. The most notable changes include a total net increase of 2.0 full-time equivalents. This includes the elimination of the Assistant Director of Public Works position, the addition of 2 patrol officers within the police department, a half FTE within the town clerk's office, and a half FTE within the Planning and Economic Development Department. Finally, a new expenditure to cover a portion of the cost of ambulance services provided through UMass, which totals $87,950. Moving on to shared operating support. Shared operating support are expenses that benefit both municipal and school operations. The year-over-year forecast, there's an increase of $1,271,065. Nearly $1.1 million of this increase is for health insurance costs. Finally, debt service is relatively level year over year, with a minimal increase of $63,442, which is funded through utility rates. Exempted debt service, which directly impacts tax bills, will decline year over year by $265,000. Turn it over for the schools.
You all set?
Yes.
Very good. The way we have traditionally handled this article is to start, in this case, on page 9 and then walk through each. And I will then go to the Personnel Board, etc. Anyone who has a question along the way, simply raise your hand and we'll cover it as we stroll through the entire operating budget. So on Article 7, starting at page 9, any questions? We'll move to page 10, the balance of the opening, 119 Personnel Board, 122 Select Board. Any questions? Page 11, 123 Town Manager, 125 Human Resources. There's a question. Yes, hello. Just 1 second, let a microphone get to you. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Please identify
Just
yourself
tell me
and
the
your
difference
precinct.
between a salary
Please
one.
identify yourself and your precinct, Fran.
My name,
Yes, please, and your precinct.
Francis Manella.
Thank you.
Precinct 3.
Thank you.
What is a salary 1, 2, and 3?
Mr. Mizikar.
Salary 1 represents department and assistant department head level positions. Salary 2 represents administrative staff, and salary 3 are professional technical positions. You're welcome.
Page 11, 123 Town Manager, 125 Human Resources, 131 Finance Committee. There's a question right over in the middle there.
Lisa Papazian, Precinct 3. Question for 131 Finance Committee. Just wondering why the big difference between 23, 24, and 25, whereas 23 it was $916, went up to $250,955, and 24 and up to $254,970 for the Finance Committee.
Mr.
Technical question. So the funds that you see in fiscal year 23 and fiscal year 22 are actually the funds that remain after all appropriations were made from this line by the Finance Committee. So the reserve account, which is what this line item is, or the vast majority of these funds here at the bottom, is used under the discretion of the Finance Committee to supplement any budgets throughout the municipal operations that need extra funding throughout the course of the fiscal year. So it is the one small set aside of funds that there is discretion across departments for. So you will see that basically all the funds that were provided to the Finance Committee in 23 and 22 were expended in their entirety. Those expenditures would show up in the departments with which they were transferred to. So through this article, we are proposing to add $254,000 to be expended at the discretion of the Finance Committee should any departments across all municipal line items fall short from July 1, 2024 through June 30th, 2025.
Further comments or questions with reference to page 11, Town Manager, Human Resources, or Finance Committee? Not seeing any, we'll move to page 12. Accountant, Assessors, Treasurer, Collector. Not seeing any. Page 13, Town Council, Town Clerk, Election and Registration. Not seeing any. We'll move to page 14, Conservation Commission, Planning and Economic Development, Planning Board. Oh, we have a question. Good evening.
Sorry. Caroline Maycomber, Precinct 9. As we look at these salaries, I'm just wondering, do we actually do a study to benchmark these salaries for town employees? Because some of them, quite frankly, seem very high to me, and I'm just wondering where we get the benchmarks from. Thank you.
Mr. Mizikar.
Sure. So the first thing I would like to say is that there may be multiple positions within any given salary area. For instance, within Planning and Economic Development, 174, the salary line item 3 represents 2 different full-time equivalents, so 2 assistant town planners. We do benchmark. We have 10 comparable communities. Those comparable communities were established by the Personnel Board, and we review our competitiveness with those 10 comparable communities at least every other year. And we make adjustments to our classification and compensation plan, which is published and available for anyone to view.
Further comments or questions with reference to Article 14, Conservation Commission, Planning and Economic Development, or Planning Board? If not, we'll move to page 15, Board of Appeals, Public Buildings, and Police Department. We have a question in the middle.
Hi, Sanam Zahir, Precinct 7. I was wondering if you can explain the justification for a $3 million increase in the police department budget over the course of the last 3 years. I'm particularly curious if there has been an increase in crime, or I know that we had the Prop 2.5 override and built the new police department, but this is a disproportionate increase compared to the other departments, and I was wondering if you could explain the justification for that.
Mr. Mizikar.
Sure. Mr. Moderator, I'll start, and then I'll have Police Chief Anderson supplement my response if necessary. So we have been seeking to increase the number of patrol officers that we have within the department, actually officers with all ranks, and that is to preserve and interact more, preserve our low crime and interact more with the community to take more of a community-oriented approach. Our driving statistic that we use is the number of calls that are handled by the department every year, and those numbers have grown exponentially over the last decade or so. When we compare ourselves to other departments, both across the Commonwealth and across the country, we remain at a very low number of officers per 1,000 residents. And we are just trying to maintain that level. We're at about 1.4 officers per 1,000 residents right now. So it's been an incremental climb. Also, we've added funding into support different software, different events, and different programs that are run by the department to increase their presence within the community on a proactive basis. So,
Chief?
I don't know if the chief.
Well, yeah, shoot over there. Well, right there's good. You can go there. Thank you.
Just to touch on that a little bit, so how we handle our staffing is we look at national averages. So the national average across the country is 2.4 per 1,000 residents. Currently, we have 1.6. And as our population grows, as well as the communities that surround us, our calls for service go up. So in the last 2 years, we're about 12% increase, and that's overall calls. It's all various calls on a daily basis. And so we need additional officers to handle the additional calls for service. The other part of that is policing is getting very, it's changing. It's become more complex. So our calls for service, when we respond, we're there much longer. Sometimes these calls take several hours, sometimes days. We have an increase in identity theft, which is very time consuming. And so just the calls for service, our officers are on call, they call for longer periods of time as well.
Thank you, Chief.
Yeah.
Mr. Mizikar?
It's one other thing with regards to non-sworn officer staff. So we have funded a mental health clinician position over the last 3 years and additional dispatching staff as well. So the total funding increase represents not only sworn officers, but civilian personnel, including the mental health clinician, which has provided exceptional outcomes for the community.
Yes, right next. Yeah, just a second.
Asking the follow-up for her, Bridget Hilton, Precinct 7. So yes, the population of Shrewsbury has increased. I know there's been a 12% increase in call volume, as the chief said. However, if you look at the blotter, it seems that the vast majority of the calls are not necessarily crime-related. So it may be suspicious person, it may be other things that may not require the full force of the police department necessarily, is what I'm seeing when I look at those. So I'm wondering, yes, maybe the volume is higher, but crime is still considerably lower than almost everywhere in the country. So yes, we added the clinician, but if the calls, yes, there's more calls, but if the crime is not going up, it just doesn't seem to add up to me. And it seems that the majority of the increase in the budget is towards staffing. So it seems like maybe we need more people on the phones.
Chief, would you like to respond to that? Thank you.
Thank you. Just to touch on that, two of those positions are actually dispatchers. As our calls for service increase, we need additional dispatchers as well.
Thank you. Yes, gentleman on the left.
Noel, sorry, Brian Noel, Precinct 9. Just to add to that, the police blotter doesn't pick up domestic disputes, which are protected from being released. So the amount of domestic disputes are not reported, and obviously those are high, serious calls. So just keep that in mind when you look at crime reports. Just add that.
Thank you. Further comments or questions with reference to Board of Appeals, Public Buildings, Police Department on page 15. Gentleman down front.
Thank you, Ed Bolter, Precinct 1.
Would you please stand, sir?
Oh, sorry.
No, that's fine.
This is an observation about the policing in the community. As I drive around town, I'll see some sort of a traffic stop, but I'll see kind of a swarming attitude where there'll be multiple cruisers, multiple police, involved in that stop. And I'm just wondering, is that because you know something about the person you're stopping, or is that just more of an officer safety? And I'm just wondering about the efficiency of that.
Chief. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, so over the past few years, we actually have 2 officers respond to every call. We have officers, 1 officer per cruiser, so that's for officer safety. We have had an increase in firearms that have been taken off the street, so that's a concern as well.
Thank you, Chief. Supplemental for Mr. Mizikar.
I would also just like to add the number of new officers that we have added over the last few years because of turnover with people leaving the department for various reasons has also meant that you would see more officers responding because of field training. So, if it's a younger officer, you may automatically see 2 people there because that would be, the officer being trained and the field training officer that would be there alongside them. And then as the second cruiser may arrive, it could be, a sergeant or a lieutenant who's on call. So there is a variety of reasons that you would see. It sometimes indicates what's happening with the call, and sometimes it could just be making sure that our new officers are receiving that proper training.
Thank you. Sure.
Just give folks here an idea. In the last 3.5 years, we've had to replace or hire 27 officers. So there's 27 officers out there with 3.5 years or less working on patrol. So we do have a lot of field training, as Mr. Mezika has stated. We also have a mentoring program that we do with older officers mentoring younger officers. So that's why you may see more officers at traffic stops as well.
Thank you, Chief. Further comments or questions with reference to page 15, Board of Appeals, Public Buildings, or Police Department? Not seeing any. We'll move to page 16, Fire Department, Building Inspector, Weights and Measures. Not seeing or hearing any. We'll move to page 17, Emergency Management, Forestry, and Other Post-Employee Benefits. Comments or questions? Not seeing any. Go to page 18, Pensions, Public Works Administration, Town Engineer, page 18. Yes, we have one in the middle of the right side. No, the right side. You're right.
Lisa Papazian, Precinct 3, line 411, Town Engineer. Just wondering what the increase in the salary from 2024 to 2025, or 107,113.
Sure. Page 18.
Yep. So, as our Department of Public Works has evolved, we moved from separate departments into divisions. As we transitioned, we originally put division managers within the professional and technical line item, but we have moved those into the department head or assistant department head line item for fiscal year 25. So you need to look at the funding that's included in salaries 3, because a portion of that in the prior years included the town engineer's salary.
You all set? Very good. Yes, sir.
Ed Bolter, Precinct 1. The pensions seems to have jumped quite a bit. Did we have a lot of retirements or planning for a lot of retirements?
Thank you. Mr. Mizikar.
We've achieved a very high level of funding for our pension system, but market fluctuations throughout any year will require us to fund less or more in any given fiscal year. So what you're seeing here is an adjustment of funding from other post-employment benefits into pensions. So you'll notice a marked decline for 24 to 25 in other post-employee benefits, and an increase, requisite increase there in pensions. So our plan going forward is to manage funds the best we can between the bottom line of these two departments, and as the pension system needs additional funding, we'll pull it in. So it's really more of a indication of market declines and total value decline of our investments than additional retirements.
Further comments or questions with reference to page 18, Pensions, Public Works Administration, or Town Engineer? Do I see a yellow card up? Yeah. Nope, okay. Page 19, Fleet Maintenance, Highway, Street Lighting. Comments or questions with reference to page 19? I'm not seeing any. Page 20, Cemeteries, Parks Maintenance, Health. Page 20. Not seeing any. Page 21, Council on Aging, Veterans Services, Commission on Disabilities. Not hearing or seeing anyone. Page 22, Library, Recreation. Not hearing or seeing anyone. We'll move to page 23, Debt. Any comments or questions with reference to page 23? Okay, page 24, Interest. Any interest on what's on page 24? I know, it's the best I could do. Okay, we will now move to page 25. The 2025 Public Schools Budget Recommendation. Mr. Winsky, if you'd care to recognize your colleagues here this evening, and Dr. Sawyer.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Good evening, town meeting members. On behalf of my colleagues, actually, first off, my name is John Wensky. I am the chairperson of the Shrewsbury School Committee. On behalf of my colleagues, Vice Chairperson Rachel Shrewsbury, Secretary Aaron Boucher, and members Sandy Fritz and Lindsay Heffernan, I'm here to present the school department's FY25 budget request. Tonight marks the culmination of our school committee budget season that began at our October 25th meeting when we shared our budget priorities and meeting calendar that included 5 budget workshops between December and April, and public meetings with the Finance Committee and Select Board. All meeting documentation is posted to our website for your review at schools.shrewsburyma.gov. So we don't expect that everybody watches our general meetings for school committee. I thought I'd start by giving you an overview of our district. Our mission statement: Shrewsbury Public Schools, in partnership with the community, will provide students with the skills and knowledge for the 21st century, an appreciation of our democratic tradition, and the desire to continue to learn throughout life. Our core values: respect and responsibility, collaboration and communication, a commitment to high standards and expectations, and equity. This is our vision. We refer to it as the Portrait of a Graduate. The project spanned 2 school years and involved collaborative cross-section of key stakeholders, including teachers, administration, parents, school committee members, and business partners. The Portrait of a Graduate defines what we believe is most critical for our students to know and be able to do by the time they graduate from Shrewsbury High School, especially the graduates that are graduating next week. We're completing year 1 of a 5-year strategic plan. Our strategic commitments are to educational excellence, enhanced well-being for all, and an optimization of resources, all of which support our portrait of a graduate vision. Our FY25 budget recommendation is reflective of this strategic plan's 3 commitments. Our performance. Shrewsbury Public Schools has ranked among the top public school districts in the state of Massachusetts in measures such as MCAS and AP testing. We're also ranked in the top 2% nationally across 7,000 school districts for return on investment by the Center for American Progress. And finally, in 2024, Niche ranked Shrewsbury 12th in its ranking of best school districts in Massachusetts, providing an overall rating of an A+. District size. Our district employs 969 staff members who provide educational services to 5,921 students, making our district the 29th largest school district out of 351 districts in the state of Massachusetts, just behind Leominster and Arlington. In terms of size, when we look at high school enrollment history as it relates to the district size, high school enrollment has been a concern over the last 15 years now. This chart shows the high school enrollment growth over the last 22 years since opening SHS in 2002. And then you take a look at a 10-year projection of high school enrollment. This was completed back in March of 2022, prior to Assabet Vocational Technical High School changing their admissions policy to no longer accept Shrewsbury students. These projections will increase by approximately 120 students per year beginning in the year 2026. And for the second consecutive year, the school committee and select board approved submitting a non-binding statement of interest to the Massachusetts School Building Authority for solving our severe space constraints at the high school. It presents the most cost-effective path forward at a 50% reimbursement to the town if we are accepted into their program. MSBA will notify all submitting districts by December if we advance to the next round. In terms of selected highlights from this school year, we've expanded our focus on career and technical education. Over the last several years, town meeting members have had many questions regarding the lack of student access to vocational education. As previously stated, there's no way for us to replicate vocational education. We have made significant progress in mitigating this challenge, including the establishment of several career pathway courses this year and receiving state approval to begin 2 official innovation career pathway programs in advanced manufacturing and biomedical life sciences for next year. We've also added a variety of opportunities for job shadowing, career fairs, and a new Lunch and Learn series where SHS alumni and community members discuss their careers with the interested students over lunch. And SHS has also made some summer internship opportunities and business project opportunities available to students this year. We are very proud that the school district has maintained its status as the Special Olympics Unified Champion School District, with all 9 schools being a unified champion school. RISE program. In only its 2nd year of existence, the Reaching Independence Through Supported Employment Program, also known as RISE, opened the new Maple and Main retail store in the town center. Our 18 to 22-year-old students in the RISE program work in the Maple and Main store, and they participate in classes in the rear portion of the Maple and Main building. The establishment of this program has already saved the school district approximately $340,000 to keep more students within our district versus out-of-district placement in comparable programs. We've also generated significant alternative revenue in FY24. Our district received funding to address key needs and programs that extend beyond our appropriated budget. In total, the district received $620,000 in alternative funding, which includes $443,500 in competitive grants. These grants are not a guarantee. They require a significant level of effort led by our district employees who go above and beyond to acquire the additional funding for critical programs that the district couldn't otherwise fund. Grants received include funding for K-6 literacy programs, career and technical education, and social and emotional learning. Now on to the FY25 budget recommendation. The recommended FY25 budget is $86,515,519, which represents a 4.5% increase over the previous FY24 budget and is within the voter-approved parameters of the May 2021 Town Override Agreement. The school committee and select board collaborated to leverage $310,000 from the American Rescue Plan Act funding for one-time purchase of curriculum materials. When you subtract the one-time funds from the total budget recommendation, the final year-over-year increase is for $3,428,897, or 4.13% increase year over year. In terms of the fiscal factors that went into this budget, collective bargaining, we have contracts in effect for FY25 other than the successor contract that is currently under negotiation with the Shrewsbury Paraprofessional Association, Unit D. Emergency homeless shelter funding estimated to provide $900,000 of reimbursement for the fiscal year. An estimated $450,000 will be carried forward to next year due to uncertainty that the state will continue this funding despite the shelter's continued operation. Federal ESSER III grant funds provided to assist school districts with managing and recovering from the pandemic will expire in September. Chapter 70 state aid funding is proposed FY25 budget provides $104 per student for Shrewsbury, significantly more than originally estimated, which over the last 2 years was $60 per student. The district's current year cost for mandated transportation of homeless students under the federal McKinney-Vento law are more than $190,000 over what was originally budgeted this year. Circuit breaker funding reimbursement program for significant special education costs. The school committee purposely maintained a strong balance to ensure that the district could manage any unexpected fiscal challenges. This spring, the projections for out-of-district special education tuition increased by over $1.2 million from the initial projection due to changing student needs and students who moved to town who are already in placements. And then finally, another factor is out-of-district special education costs. Key district challenges. We continue the academic recovery from the pandemic by closing learning gaps with a focus on support for reading and instruction and literacy. Student mental and behavioral health needs have become increasingly difficult. There's also been a significant increase in students that require English language education. There's been an 82% increase from October of 2021 to March of 2024 for students that require these services. We will continue to focus, as I mentioned, on career and technical education opportunities to mitigate the access gap. And finally, the demands related to information technology have increased, which include the need to mitigate cybersecurity threats to our technology infrastructure. So what's included in the recommendation? 86% of the budget recommendation is for the 969 employees that serve nearly 6,000 students in Shrewsbury. Our plan carries forward all staff and services and makes investments to address key challenges. The investments into those key challenges are aligned with our strategic priorities. They include investments in literacy, career and technical education, special education, and IT and cybersecurity. For more context on each of these investments, I direct your attention to the pages 3 through 5 of your school committee booklets. Just want to talk briefly about carrying forward all staff and services. Shrewsbury is very different from many school districts. Throughout the state, school districts are struggling with budget deficits due to rising educational costs and inflationary pressures and making significant cuts as they prepare for FY25. This is not the case in our town, thanks to the voter-approved May 2021 override agreement providing stability and predictability for 4 budget cycles, and we are extending our commitment for another 2 budget cycles beyond FY25. Just taking a look at the 15-year history of our appropriated budget between what was originally recommended in blue and the final budget in orange, you can see we've experienced many ups and downs over the years, which included making reductions as a result of significant budget gaps. But after May of 2021, you see how that's changed for the better. Per pupil expenditures, it's worth noting that Shrewsbury Public Schools spends approximately 14% less per pupil than the state average. Looking at a 5-year trend, Shrewsbury is in the blue line and the state average is in the red. We spend $2,844 per student less than the state average. And when you look at per pupil expenditures versus all Massachusetts districts, we're in the bottom 15 percentile, 267th out of 314 reporting districts. Average cost per pupil comparison. So when we look at Shrewsbury in orange and how we rank amongst comparable districts, the state average is in red. We're spending below the state average and less per pupil than 10 comparable school districts. In terms of our rankings for FY24 and cost per pupil, we're in the bottom 15 percentile, as mentioned. We rank 73rd of 351 communities in income per capita, in the top 21st percentile, and rank 54th of 351 communities in equalized property valuation in the top 15th percentile. Basically, per pupil expenditure conclusions, it's fair to say that we are a pretty cost-effective organization. If we had spent the state average per pupil, the budget would need to increase by $16.8 million. So to recap, this is the budget recommendation for FY25 for the school district, and I'd like to thank you for your support. We're happy to take any questions that you might have. I'd like to also invite Dr. Sawyer, Mr. Girardi, to assist in response as needed. Thank you so much.
Dr. Sawyer, Mr. Girardi, good evening. Comments or questions for the school department? I see one in the middle. Right here. Could you keep your hand up, please? Thank you.
As we entered page 40
Could you please identify yourself?
Louise Garone, Precinct 8. As we entered, page 40 of your report was replaced, and there's a quite large difference in the chart. Can you please clarify the nature of the change? Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, I appreciate that, and I apologize for the error. It's not a change in the chart, it's just which chart was where. So the chart that was originally at the bottom of page 40 was supposed to be the chart on the bottom of page 42, and vice versa. They were transposed during a late edit that I had asked for, so I'll take responsibility for that, but they're just flip-flopped. So the pages you were issued are in the correct order.
Other comments or questions with reference to the school department's budget? Yes, Ms. Garnett.
Dating Garnett, Precinct 2. 8 years ago, we were here, and I'm not quite sure this really pertains to the budget as much as the curriculum in the schools. 8 years ago, we were here, and we approved the marijuana retail locations. And we talked about the curriculum that was going to change in the schools, because at that time, we were concerned that the kids were not being taught enough, and Dr. Sawyer, at that time you said that we were going to have to revamp what we were teaching the kids, because we were worried that marijuana was coming to the schools, coming to town, and the kids were not prepared enough, and the schools weren't prepared enough with, I guess, education for this. And I'm wondering what we've done to change the drug education program since it's come to town, and how much of our marijuana tax dollars are going to the schools for that program.
I can give a broad answer to the first question, and I'll defer to Mr. Mizikar about the second in terms of revenue. We did make some adjustments, as we do on a consistent basis, to our health education program. We usually base those adjustments on data we get from our regional youth health survey. which is conducted every 2 years. We are waiting for the tabulation of those results from the Worcester Department of Public Health and working with us around statistics from the time it was given this year. From 2 years ago, what I can tell you is that what we've seen over time and what we've seen on a national basis is consistent, is that students' attitudes about the potential harm caused by marijuana has decreased in terms of perceiving that it is something that is unhealthy or something that would be that they perceive would be frowned upon by their peers or by potentially, typically they're still their families. We'll look forward to reporting those statistics when they come out for the high school students who took that survey this year. In terms of what's been happening around our health curriculum, I think an increased emphasis on what some of the harms can be, the fact that it is an illegal drug for those under the age of 21, just like alcohol is, and what some of the concerns are, particularly whether it's connected to vaping, whether it's vaping cannabis itself or vaping generally, which is an issue. Those of you who are part of the high school community know that Mr. Bazidlo, the high school principal, recently sent a message out to families asking for support in addressing the very significant concerns and problem with vaping that we're seeing among our students, some very significant, particularly nicotine addiction that students are demonstrating at Shrewsbury High School. I'll be curious to see what those statistics look like from that survey as well. But I wouldn't be able to tell you the specific chapter and verse of some of the changes our health teachers have made, but certainly there has been and continued emphasis that although cannabis was made legal in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and certainly is legal here in terms of distribution within Shrewsbury to those of age, that there are concerns and health elements connected to marijuana use that we want our students to be aware of at the middle school and the high school age when they do have that health curriculum. And as far as the actual amount that's being sent toward the school district relative to marijuana funds, I'll have ask Mr. Mizikar to respond to that.
So there's two portions that the town receives currently, or up until this year, for marijuana excise. You'll remember that this body voted to allow them to come in, and they provide 3% retail sales. And through negotiations of the select board, through what is known as host community agreement, the retailers provide an additional 3% to the community. The Cannabis Control Commission has eliminated that second provision, so communities are no longer allowed to require, through host community agreements, that additional 3% revenue. We have to substantiate actual costs and then bill the marijuana entities for those costs. In the first 3 full years, which would be 21, 22, and 23, of that additional 3%, we received $705,458. Those funds were dedicated in our overall revenue mix, as we reported out, towards health programs within the schools. The second portion, which will remain, which isn't related to that, which is the base 3% excise tax, we've received $1,085,121 from marijuana sales within the community. So that second portion is going away, and we've slowly reduced our reliance upon it, and I don't see any future impact on health programs in the school because of our conservative approach.
Further comments or questions with reference to the budget of the school department? Yes. Would you like to be? Okay.
Sanam Zaire, Precinct 7. I noticed on page 12 of the school budget report, you noted that you're planning to conduct another equity audit. I was wondering if you could highlight a few specific items that you have accomplished or followed up on from the last equity audit. And the second question I have is what the district hopes to gain from a second equity audit when most of the information is publicly available on the DESE website. So just to, I don't know if the first question was confusing, but I'm curious from the last equity audit, which I'm very familiar with, what specific items has the district taken action on?
Mr. Sawyer.
Thank you. I think the few areas that we focused on specifically, one is working on a significant effort to diversify our workforce. That's something that Ms. Malone, the Executive Director of Human Resources, and a team of educators from across the district has been working on for multiple years. We are seeing some slow but sure progress. That is a challenging area, particularly for those licensed positions, just because the pools of candidates typically are not as diverse as we might like them to be. But we have a commitment to working to see how we can have a workforce that better reflects the composition of our community and the composition of our student body. And Ms. Malone's made reports on that each of the last couple of years, and we definitely are making some progress. But we've revamped our personnel processes in a way that focuses on making sure that each hiring team is looking at ways to run that process in a way that may avoid unconscious bias that can be in the system, as we know from various research around that, and how we can identify opportunities for people who are already in our district, for example, perhaps in a paraprofessional position, to get a professional licensure and move into a teaching role eventually. We've been able to diversify our paraprofessional and support staff more rapidly, but we are seeing progress in the teaching and professional level roles as well. Other areas that we've been looking at, we've been monitoring. We have not been cited as being disproportional, as a number of districts have across the state, relative to student discipline. That is something that is not disproportionate in Shrewsbury, according to the state metrics that they hold us accountable to. That said, we've been doing work with our school administrators with regard to making sure that the way we approach student discipline, especially serious student discipline such as suspensions or potential expulsions, are being done in a way that consider alternative measures instead of suspension, and paying attention to whether or not there is any sort of pattern in terms of how students are being disciplined for the same type of infraction based on that student demographic. Another area that we focused on. In terms of curriculum, we have done an ongoing review of the kinds of materials that we have in our classrooms, in terms of whether that's reading material, whether that's when we're adopting a new program like the literacy program that we're bringing into effect for across grades K through 6 next year, to make sure that that literature reflects a variety of cultures and reflects a variety of identities in terms of students' racial and cultural background. And that is something that we believe will be achieved as a result. It's a very rigorous program that we're adopting, but definitely reflects more of what the current America looks like than what it might have looked like 15, 20, or 30 years ago. So those are just 3 examples. I think that in terms of a future audit, the idea would be to look at what kind of progress we've made since the previous one, and make sure that we're getting good feedback around how we can be sure that all of our students and all of our community members, our families, our staff, feel, which our goal is that they're unconditionally accepted for who they are, and that they feel welcome, and that they feel a real sense of belonging to being part of the Shrewsbury Public Schools community. So those are a few examples.
Other comments or questions with reference to the school department budget? Yes.
Hi, Caroline Maycomber, Precinct 9. I was just wondering what we've done to look at the cost of maintaining the iPads that seem to be used quite a bit, even post-pandemic, as far as everyday use in the classroom and after hours for homework. Given what we know from the American Academy of Pediatrics, screen time for more than an hour a day is really highly discouraged for young children and their developing eyes. And so when I look at this from a budgetary standpoint, I would imagine with the new technical coordinator position that we're looking to hire, obviously I understand there are cybersecurity concerns, but perhaps if we went back to regular old teaching without iPad reliance, we could decrease those costs. So just wondering if that's something we've even looked at. Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Prior to the pandemic, the Shrewsbury Public Schools had made the decision to move into a one-to-one device with iPad learning environment from grades 5 through 12. The pandemic forced us to add that device, and we had some device use at the elementary school at that point, but not to the extent. With the pandemic, that changed, of course, where we relied on students having devices at home, whether that was during the lockdown or then afterwards when we were in a hybrid mode for a year, almost a year. I think that it's something that we continue to look at. One of the benefits that we see, with the caveat that I think all of us are concerned about what students' exposure to, overexposure to screen time could mean for them. And I think part of that is what's the quality and what they're doing on those screens and when. And in terms of what's being done in classrooms, I think that our teachers are being judicious about their use during the school day. One of the things that we believe is a positive regarding the students having access to those devices in terms of really an equity issue is that regardless of whether a student, regardless of their socioeconomic status, through the ability to utilize online books, for example, there's a program called SORA that our students happen to be, I think, among the leaders, if not the leader in the state in terms of checking out and reading books through that service, essentially a digital book service like you would get through the Shrewsbury Public Library aimed at students that's run through our own school library media centers. Access to math programming, we have a very substantive program with a program called ST Math that is promoted as something that has some research behind it demonstrating students' ability to develop critical thinking and problem-solving skills in a way that can be helpful to their mathematic development. Certainly, we don't encourage that when students get home from school. Our homework time is very limited in terms of what we expect for our youngest children. And in terms of what we see, typically, although we certainly occasionally have issues with kids misusing the iPads, they're well filtered. And typically, when we see issues with kids with digital issues, they're almost always on a personal device that their family has purchased for them, whether that's a phone or a personal iPad or laptop at home. And that's something that we continue to look at. We need to continue to review. Right now, there is not really a choice in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. The state testing program is digital. There is not an option for paper and pencil state MCAS testing. It's all done online. That is the expectation of all districts across the state, and that's something that we obviously provide. You may know that the SAT has moved to an entirely digital environment. I expect that the AP tests will follow suit before too long. So we believe that we want to use those devices appropriately, purposefully, but given the concerns that continue to be raised about students' improper use of social media and other elements of online issues outside of school, how we continue to try to promote digital citizenship and help improve that approach the best we can, I think is well noted, and something that I think will continue to evolve over the coming years. But I appreciate the comment and the question.
Thank you. Further comments or questions with reference to the school department budget? Yes, right down front.
Hi, Shannon Wall, Precinct 7. I appreciated the optimization of resources, and I was wondering if there are more shared services like the IT positions you're hiring that could be shared services between the school department and the town.
Dr. Sawyer.
One thing that I would like to assure you, and I think back to a time when Mr. Magada was the town manager and Mr. Hale was the executive director of Selco, when the position was created, the IT director position that functions under Selco and the municipal departments that Mr. Honorato currently holds. And I want to assure you that at that time and going forward, there has been an extremely high degree of collaboration and synergy between the team at Selco and the municipal departments and the school department relative to issues around infrastructure, networking, phone system, and cybersecurity. Our network is significantly larger than the town's network, given that we have 9 sites, given that there are the demands of serving 6,000 users every day, pretty much throughout the business day. All of our student information services, state reporting requirements in terms of data regarding educators and students. As you can imagine, all the personal student information having to do with report cards, test scores, guidance council reports, and the like, and all of our personnel records. As virtually every organization across any sector, these are all digital. We need to make sure they're protected. We need to make sure that the threats that frankly have become constant with regard to cybersecurity, and one only needs to do some quick online searches to find out the number of school districts that have been held hostage through ransomware and had essentially their entire operation shut down for some period of time for ransom through cybersecurity hacks or ransomware. That's something we work hard to avoid, and I can assure you that the Selco team works with the school department team closely on that. I can say with confidence that if both organizations just operated totally separately, both would probably need more personnel, that there is some synergy across them. If all of those needs could be taken care of with the existing personnel we had and working in conjunction with Selco, we'd certainly prefer to do that because there are lots of opportunities. I mean, I can tell you that there were about somewhere around the lines of $2 million of requests from the leadership team across all of our schools and all of our leadership roles for potential investments to make our schools better and stronger and improve our educational program that did not see the light of day because we knew that we had to focus on what was most strategically important and what was most important to maintain the programs that we do have and to avoid issues like cybersecurity threats. And so, you know, being able to spend those dollars on something else relative to the education program would be something I'd love to do, but based on the experts that we have in our programs and what is expected in the field and what our needs are, we thought this was an important investment to make as far as adding these two positions for the coming year, and particularly that network position for cybersecurity.
Thank you, Dr. Sawyer. Further comments are right down front. Dadine?
Dadine Garnett, Precinct 2. I just had a quick question about a presentation made at, I believe it was last month's meeting. It was about a couple positions, and please forgive me because I'm really not too sure about this. It was an academic coordinator position, a full-time clinician contracted from Shrewsbury Youth and Family Services, a clinical coordinator, BCBA support, and a paraprofessional support, paraprofessional support position. Can you just explain those positions, what they're for, and if they're permanent positions, how they're being funded, and if they're, again, if they're permanent and how they're being handled? Thank you.
Dr. Sawyer.
Happy to do that. On your, at the bottom of page 4 and the top of page 5 in your packet, I believe these are the positions you're referring to in terms of the beginning of what is known as a therapeutic program at our elementary school level. This is an evolution of an elementary transition program we put together this year to assist some students who came to us from the emergency shelter, who are young children who had never been in formal school before, who needed some transitional services in order to be prepared to move into a general education classroom successfully. We're using that as sort of a launching place to do something that a number of districts around us already do, which is to provide a therapeutic program for students who are struggling with either their behavioral needs or social and emotional needs. These are students, if their needs are great enough, currently, we would have to send to an out-of-district placement in a specialized therapeutic school at significant cost to the district, both for the tuition for that school as well as the transportation to get that student to and from school outside of town every day. Ms. Belcito and her team have proposed creating this therapeutic program, which would consist of one special educator teacher, one board-certified behavior analyst clinical coordinator who would work in tandem to provide educational services as well as therapeutic services, counseling and behavioral support and the like to students who are not currently able to be successful in a general education classroom setting, but to keep them within their neighborhood, Shrewsbury community, to meet their educational needs. And there would likely be, I believe, 2 paraprofessional positions that would be shifted from some existing positions in order to make that program work in terms of the supports needed. I think in terms of the whether they're permanent positions, if this program is successful, we would expect it would continue. We believe ultimately very much under the auspices of this commitment to optimization of resources, that it would be more cost-effective than sending students out of district and have the benefit of keeping students in. Very similar, different kind of program, but very similar to what Mr. Wensky mentioned earlier, where we are already realizing about $340,000 of cost savings this year alone by opening the RISE Maple and Maine program. That's the difference between what it would cost to send those students to out-of-district placements versus having them in our own homegrown program, so to speak. So that's the intent, and we expect that will actually be over time a budget savings for us. We're going to fund those positions initially out of some funds we're receiving from the state that are designed to reimburse us for costs associated with the shelter. But those are designed to offset costs, and therefore we can utilize them for a variety of needs. We believe that's a good use of seed money to get that program off the ground next year.
Thank you, Dr. Sawyer. Further comments or questions with reference to the school department budget? Not hearing or seeing anyone. Ms. Flynn.
Flynn, Precinct 7. While we have the school department here with us, I don't want to kick the hornet's nest, but there's a lot of talk about per pupil cost, especially as we talk about potential growth in Shrewsbury. And I was hoping you could clarify for all of us, specifically when we look at adding students to the system, are we applying that average per pupil cost to each incremental student? And if not, how should we be looking at the incremental cost?
Mr. Girardi.
Thank you. Chris Girardi, Assistant Superintendent for Finance and Operations. When we look at per pupil cost, we think of it as how many seats we can fit on the airplane. So if we're looking at the per pupil cost of just over $17,000 per student, if we receive 15 students from, say, a new housing complex, those numbers can add up pretty quickly. But as we see over at off of Route 20, there's a complex there. We're receiving 15 students that are spread across all of the schools. We're able to absorb them at no cost. So the numbers would have to stack up pretty significantly at a specific school, at a specific grade level, to where it would need to incur additional teachers, additional transportation or buses for that community.
Further comments or questions with reference to the school department budget? Not hearing or seeing anyone, we will now return to the report. Thank you, gentlemen. We'll now return to the report of the Finance Committee, and I ask that you draw your attention to page 27, operating support. Any comments or questions with reference to page 27, operating support? Okay, if not, I will call the vote on this article. Oh, gentleman in the center. Mr. Remington.
Good evening. My name is David Remington, Precinct 9. So I'd just like to make a general comment about the budget and the budget model. In 2021, we passed an override and decided that we'll have a 4-year, no override. We'll have a new budget model, one that we haven't used before. Right now, if you look at our projected budget, if you look at 27, 2028, 2029, we're about $15 million in debt. You add on 2030, we're $24 million in debt. With the stabilization fund, it drops it down about $15 million in debt. So we're spending more than we're taking in. With this budget model, we have to have an override. I think the town manager said every 4 years. We pushed it off to 6 years, so we'll say every 5 years. So this budget model, which is used by some towns, every 5 years we're going to have an override. And then we're going to have, in the middle of those, we're going to add in any infrastructure we need, just like the school they talked about. At best case scenario, we're $70 million debt exclusion for the high school. That'll be between those. So this budget model is not something I like. I've spoken to members of the select board, I've spoken to the town manager and finance committee and Dr. Sawyer, and I think we have to rethink how we make the budget so that we have a lower override and we have it further out. Because if any of these overrides fail, it's going to be catastrophic. All the things we vote on tonight will be gone. And we have to do that every 5 years. So we did, all of us as town manager, town meeting members agreed, this was what we're going to do for 4 years. So I'm going to vote yes tonight because this is the 4th year, and that's what we told the voters who voted for it. So we got to keep our word. But in the future, we need to change this budget model. We cannot continue this unless you absolutely think, even though we've only passed 2 overrides out of 9, that every 5 years the town is going to allow an override and all the debt exclusions between it for our infrastructure. So I bring that up because I have talked to the committees about it, and I want the town members to think about that. In the future, if we continue this, an override will fail and everything gets wiped out. So let's change the model. Let's decide how we keep the overrides smaller and more spread out. That's my comment, sir.
Further comments or questions with reference to Article 7? Not seeing or hearing this, any further comments or questions? And with this requiring a majority vote, I'll now call the vote. All those in favor shall signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. We're now on to Article 8. Article 8, 9, and 10 are elements of Bundle 7.
I move the printed motions under Articles 8, 9, and 10.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Finance Committee.
The Finance Committee recommends Articles 8, 9, and 10 by a vote of 9-0.
Mr. Mizikar.
These 3 articles appropriate funds from outside of the tax levy. There are 3 different sources to which come from Selco, and the final one being free cash, which is unallocated fund balance of the town. Using these funds reduces the impact on the tax levy, the tax rate, and tax bills benefiting the taxpayers.
Thank you very much. Comments or questions with reference to Article 8? Article 9? Article 10? Not hearing or seeing any. I'll call the vote on Bundle 7, Articles 8, 9, and 10. All those in favor shall signify by saying aye. I'm sorry, we have a question. If I don't see you, just yell, you say something.
Hello, Caroline Maycomber, Precinct 9. This is my first town meeting, so I apologize if this is a silly question. So when we say in lieu of taxes, what would the taxes otherwise be that we'd be receiving, like from Selco, for example? Is this saying that we just take a random, like a lump sum dollar amount instead of them paying taxes to the residents for services, or am I misunderstanding the article? Thank you.
Certainly. Mr. Mizikar.
So since Selco is a department of the town, an entity within the town, there's no obligation for them to pay property taxes or anything like that. So Selco, in good faith to the town, as a clear partner shoulder to shoulder with us and for you and providing you services, dedicates these funds to the town in lieu of taxes, even though they don't need to pay taxes. So there's no obligation for Selco to do this, but it provides an extreme benefit for us. These dollar values that Selco provides is actually pretty close and as near as we can get to what they actually would have paid if they were a for-profit entity, investor-owned utility within the community.
Further comments or questions with reference to Articles 8, 9, or 10? Not hearing or seeing anyone, I'll call the vote. All those in favor shall signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? The ayes have it. We'll now move to Bundle 8, Articles 11, 12, 13, and 14.
I move the printed motions under Articles 11, 12, 13, and 14.
Second.
Articles having been moved and seconded. Finance Committee.
Finance Committee recommends Articles 11, 12, 13, and 14 by a vote of 9-0.
Thank you. Mr. Mizikar.
These 4 articles set the annual operating budgets for 4 different aspects of the Department of Public Works. These 4 areas of operation are solid waste, sewer, water, and stormwater. These different aspects of the department operate as separate lines of business, and their revenue expenses are tracked outside of the general fund. Revenues raised by rates and fees are dedicated solely to the operation of the associated system, and they're managed under Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 53F and a half, and therefore we take them separate and apart from the regular operating budget.
Comments or questions with reference to Article 11? Article 12? Article 13? Article 14? Not hearing or seeing any, I'll call the roll. All those in favor of Article 11, 12, 13, and 14 shall signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. It's unanimous majority. Article 15.
I move the printed motion under Article 15.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded on Article 15. Finance Committee.
Finance Committee recommends Article 15 by a vote of 9-0.
Mr. Mizikar.
This article sets aside FY25 operating budget funds of $432,000 for the cable television, public, educational, and government access services. There's a franchise fee that is assessed to all Selco cable subscribers. The franchise fee is dedicated to the operation of public access programming on 4 high-definition channels. Shrewsbury Media Connection, a nonprofit organization, is contracted to broadcast public meetings and support the production of other programming for the community. This article allows for the receipt of funds from Selco and transferring those for the operation of Shrewsbury Media Connection.
Thank you, Mr. Mizikar. Any comments or question with reference to Article 15? I'd like to take this moment to thank Mark Serra and the entire crew for the work they do to publish, to broadcast all of the public meetings in town. Any comments or questions, Article 15? Yes, Mr. Molina.
Jason Molina, Precinct 10. Are these recommended funds sufficient for the operations of the entity? And if it's not, what is the proposal going forward if we now have any idea what it's going to be to backfill any shortcomings in order to make sure that the entity remains solvent and is able to continue on providing the services they've been doing so far? Thank you.
Mr. Mizikar.
Currently they are. The revenues slightly exceed the total expenses, and SMC has been preparing with everyone cutting the cable or cutting the cord over time. So your second question is, to be direct, a question for the community to answer in the future. How will we fund the continued operation of such great services to the community, and something that we will take up well in advance as we see that revenue decline to a level that doesn't sustain the services any longer.
Comments and questions with reference to Article 15? Not hearing or seeing any, we'll call the vote. All those in favor shall signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The motion carries on 15. Next up is Bundle 10, Articles 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, and 22.
I move the printed motions under Articles 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, and 22.
Second.
Finance Committee.
Finance Committee recommends Articles 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, and 22 by a vote of 9-0.
Mr. Mizikar.
These articles are bundled together because they are the most common routine transactions that you'll see on each and every warrant article from year to year. They are a diverse set of articles, and I'll walk through them here to provide some clarity prior to your vote. So Article 16 uses $6,576 in free cash to satisfy the town's obligations to its disabled police and fire pensioners. under Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 41, Section 100B, where we pay out-of-pocket medical expenses on a reimbursement basis to those individuals. Articles 17 through 19 are internal transfers to reserve asset accounts, which would be used in times of emergency or need in the future. This includes a deposit into the insurance trust fund, the town's general stabilization fund of $2.1 million, which is our true rainy day fund, bringing that account to the first time ever to the policy level of 5%. Article 19 into the sewer stabilization fund for similar purposes using sewer revenues. And then Article 20, in accordance with the general laws, Chapter 44, Section 53E and a half, sets specific funding levels for the town's 2 revolving accounts. Revolving accounts receive funds for specific purposes and then rededicate those dollars for expenses related to providing those services. For us, that's Council on Aging, Transportation, and the operation of the Donahue Rowing Center. And finally, Article 21 accepts funding from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, which is set aside for roadway improvements and related services, also known as Chapter 90 funding. The base Chapter 90 funding we anticipate for fiscal year 25 is $986,757. And
22.
Article 22 is a transfer of funds for the sale of cemetery lots to cover expenses associated with the management and operation of the cemetery.
Comments or questions with reference to Article 16? Article 17. Article 18. Yes.
Hello, Caroline Maycomber, Precinct 9. Just had a question. As far as that $2 million, I believe it was for Article 19, what specific line items would that be for a rainy day fund? I'm just wondering if we could get the specifics.
Mr. Mizuka.
So Article 18, which is the General Stabilization Fund, this is, there's no specific line items related with it. Think of it as the town's deep savings account. So if for some reason in future years or at a future time the town experienced some type of emergency, extreme economic hardship, financial downturn, and we weren't able to raise enough money to provide core services through the operating budget, we could rely upon these funds in lieu of revenue within a given period of time. So it is truly an emergency fund that we would rely upon for unforeseen circumstances in the future. So placing money into this account is a simple majority, and pulling funds out of it requires 2/3. So it's an important reserve asset of the community. Hopefully we never have to rely upon it. We are bringing it to the 5% of the total expenditures within the operating budget, which is a standard policy. It is looked upon very favorably by rating agencies, bond rating agencies, in maintaining our AAA bond rating, which enables us to secure the lowest interest rates when we access the bond market for debt purposes.
Comments or questions with reference to Article 18? Article 19? Question on Article 19.
Nadine Garnett, Precinct 2. I've asked this before, and I honestly don't remember the answer. What was the reason that the DRC became not private, but so that the public can't use it any longer? I know that there's a lot of different clubs that are using it currently, but what was the reason that it's no longer able for people to rent it out?
Mr. Mizuka.
I don't know. I honestly don't know the answer to that. Anyone in the room?
Department head know the answer to the question? You've stumped us. We will seek to have an answer for you tomorrow evening. Article 19, any questions? Article 20, any questions? Article 21. Article 22. Not seeing any, oh, I'm sorry. Yes, go ahead.
That keeps on giving. Caroline Maycomber, Precinct 9. I had a question on Article 21, and it sort of also relates to Article 44, the MBTA Communities Act. And I'm wondering, and it may be a question for Town Council, I'm not sure, but I know there's 4 specific grants that we could be denied if we do vote no on Article 44. And I'm wondering if any of the Chapter 90 funds are ones that would be in jeopardy should we choose to vote no on Article 44. Thank you.
Mr. Misikar?
No, Chapter 90 is not a grant. It's a statutory formula that funds are distributed to every community within the Commonwealth, and it is not one of the areas that is subject to compliance with MBTA zoning.
Further comments or questions with reference to Article 21? Article 22? Not hearing or seeing any, I'll call the roll on Articles 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, and 22. All those in favor shall signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Article 23.
I move the printed motion under Article 23.
Second.
Finance Committee.
Finance Committee recommends Article 23 by a vote of 9-0.
Mr. Misikar?
This article proposes to fund $35,000 to fund weed control and other lake improvement activities on Lake Quinsigamond. Additionally, funds will be used for a variety of other water quality studies, improvements, weed control, and other water quality management initiatives on other lakes, ponds, and waterways within the town.
Thank you. Further comments or questions with reference to Article 23? Yes. Mr. Cray.
Precinct 2. Is there any user fees that can pay for that?
Mr. Misikar?
The only fees that we charge are associated with the use of the boat ramp. So those fees come in to the Recreation Department and cover our costs and associated with that. So this initiative is a little bit broader than that, since it includes all other bodies of water and waterways within the community.
Further comments or questions with reference to Article 23? Not hearing or seeing any, I'll call the vote. It's a simple majority. All those in favor of Article 23 shall signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Article 24.
Move the printed motion under Article 24.
Second.
Finance Committee.
Finance Committee recommends Article 24 by a vote of 9-0.
Mr. Misikar?
This article proposes to allocate $326,000 to fund counseling and education services under contract with Shrewsbury Youth and Family Services.
Comments or questions with reference to Article 24? Ms. Maycomber.
Thank you. I had a question as far as that goes. Don't we already have school adjustment counselors? So I'm wondering why we would also need to purchase additional counseling services when there's already school adjustment counselors? Thank you.
Mr. Misikar?
So this provides counseling and education services to the community at large. The previous discussion was specific to needs within the Shrewsbury Public Schools. The history of this funding obligation and requirement dates back I think over 4 decades, in a ruling by a state judge requiring the community to establish some way of providing these services to youth and families across the town. Many other similar initiatives and requirements happen to other cities and towns, and we provide it through a very efficient model, which is a private nonprofit organization.
Other comments or questions with reference to Article 24? Yes, Mr. Cray?
Robert Cray, Precinct 2. Is there any means testing for this?
Mr. Misikar?
Means testing for, I'm not sure what the question is related to.
Mr. Craig.
The question is whether there's means testing for the services, or does everybody who knocks on the door get it for free?
I don't know the answer to the question.
Yes, no, I know. We just, Kevin does not know the answer. Any of the department heads know the answer to that question?
Means testing for it.
Nope. We'll get that for you tomorrow night. See you. Further comments or questions with reference to Article 24? Yes. How are you? Fantastic.
Sandy McManus, Precinct 10. What is the ARPA fund stand for?
Thank you. Mr. Mizuka?
So ARPA funds is American Rescue Plan Act, and that was funding that was provided to the community in 2021 as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. The town received roughly $11.6 million, and because of the impact on mental health, we've slowly increased funding through free cash and American Rescue Plan Act funds for these services. But this will be the last year that we have access to those dollars.
Thank you. Further? Yes, Ms. Vetta? How are you?
Good, thank you. Judy Vetter, Precinct 9. We're going to be looking at Article 31 in a bit about the opioid fund, and I was wondering if any portion of this Shrewsbury Youth and Family Services fee could actually be taken out of that account and lessen the amount that's coming out of free cash.
Mr. Mizuka?
Only to the extent that they're providing services that are able to be funded through the settlement agreements with those drug companies. So if there is substance abuse that they're being provided, then yes. However, the funds that we're using the other dollars for is primarily for mental health counseling. We are actually working on an action plan that with our partners in public health through the Central Mass Regional Public Health Alliance for the use of the settlement dollars. As we work on that plan internally, we'll be reaching out to the community on how we plan to spend it. So in the near term, we don't intend to use any of it to provide for SYSF. Something we could consider depending on the services that they're providing.
I think, you know, as we get it established, but if we could maybe, I understand it wouldn't be all of it, but if we could lessen the amount that we're taking out of free cash and use that. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments or questions with reference to Article 24? Not hearing or seeing any, I'll call the roll. It's a simple majority. All those in favor shall signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. It passes. We will ignore the bundle 13 and take each one independently. Article 25.
I move the printed motion under Article 25.
Second.
Finance Committee.
Finance Committee recommends Article 25 by a vote of 9-0.
Mr. Mizuka.
Article 25 is the General Capital Improvement Plan for municipal departments. This year, we're proposing the use of $714,125 across 10 non-utility municipal departments to fund a variety of initiatives that are listed and detailed in the motion.
Other comments or questions with reference to Article 25? Not hearing. Oh.
Patricia Minton, Precinct 7. Recreation vehicle, what's that for?
That is a van that will allow us to transport individuals and materials. Currently, we're relying upon external transportation and parks and cemetery vehicles to move recreation materials for events and programs around, so this would be their own vehicle.
Also, with the replacement of the motorcycle and cruisers, will the old ones be sold?
They will be, yes.
Thank you. Comments or questions with reference to Article 25?
Yes, Ms. Maycomber.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I had a question regarding for our police force for the TASER bundle. It's my understanding that there's usually grants available. So I want to make sure our officers are equipped with what they need to do their jobs, but I'm wondering if we applied for any grants for things such as the TASER bundles and the body cameras. Thank you.
Mr. Mizuka.
We always pursue every grant dollar that is available to us. We are not currently receiving any dollars for body-worn cameras or tasers. This is an ongoing initiative that will never go away. It's part of our core operations. We are funding these two items over time. They have a very short duration of life, 3 to 5 years for cameras and 3 to 5 years for tasers. So we're always cycling through. So we operate with vendors on a 3-year service agreement. So again, currently right now, we're not using grant funding. And since this is an ongoing source, or ongoing cost, I would be a little bit hesitant to do that.
Other comments or questions with reference to Article 25? Not down front. Yes, good evening.
Would someone please explain, sorry, Martha Deering, Precinct 4. Would someone please explain to me what a barber's sandman is?
Mr. Mizuka. Mr. Esposito.
Kevin Esposito, I'm the Parks Division Manager, and the Barber Sandman is a rake machine that would help us maintain the infield that we have in town. It's like the big beach rake that you see at ocean beaches, except it's a smaller unit.
Thank you. Further comments or questions with reference to Article 25? Yes, sir. Please stand if you can.
Rajesh Uppalpati, Precinct 4. I have a doubt regarding the IT.
I can't hear you, sir. Keep the microphone closer to your mouth, please.
Yeah, the difference between IT budget there and also the library computers, keyboards, and monitors.
Yes, Mr. Mizuka.
The hardware and software apply across all general municipal departments, and then the library is just the specific needs for the library itself. The other distinction is those library needs are public-facing needs, so these are the public equipment that's used by patrons, and the hardware and software under IT generally are internal pieces of equipment that's used by staff.
Article 25, further comments or questions? Not hearing or seeing any. I'll call the roll. This is a simple majority on Article 25. All those in favor shall signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Article 26.
I move the printed motion under Article 26.
Second.
Finance Committee.
Finance Committee recommends Article 26 by a vote of 9-0.
Mr. Mizuka.
Article 26 funds the capital improvement plan for the sewer department. It utilizes the sum of $2,608,140 from sewer surplus and $300,000 from the inflow and infiltration fund, and $569,424.28 from a variety of accounts that were funded for other projects in previous years by this body but are no longer needed. We plan to invest in the 6 items that are shown there at the bottom of the screen. In total, $3,477,565.
Comments or questions with reference to Article 26? Ms. Maycumber?
So if I'm reading this correctly, under the description section, it looks like there's about $41,000 of that 569 that's from improving Jordan Pond. So I'm wondering if I'm reading this correctly, it's saying we're going to take over $40,000 that was meant to be used to improve Jordan Pond, and we're going to use it for something to improve the sewers?
Mr. Mizikar?
So that would have been the Jordan Pond Pump Station, not Jordan Pond itself.
Comments or questions with reference to Article 26? Not hearing or seeing any in this, requiring a 2/3 vote. I'll ask that all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Article 27.
I move the printed motion under Article 27.
Second.
Finance Committee.
Finance Committee recommends Article 27 by a vote of 9-0.
Mr. Mizikar?
So like previous articles, this funds a specific capital improvement plan, and this time it's the stormwater operations. There's 3 different investments, which are included here on the screen, totaling $414,000.
Thank you. Comments or questions with reference to Article 27? Were you pointing to somebody who had their hand up? No, okay, I'm sorry. Yes, please, Ms. Minton.
Tricia Minton, Precinct 7. Sorry, yeah. How many street sweepers do we currently have, and why are we replacing getting a new one?
Mr. Mizikar?
Mr. Truman?
Mr. Truman?
Mr. Repecta, Mr. Kimball?
This one. Nick Repecta, Highway Division Manager.
Andy Truman, Town Engineer.
Currently, we have 2 street sweepers. Both of them will still be in service. They are the broom-type street sweeper. The one that we are potentially going to invest in is the vacuum-type sweeper.
Yeah, and the reason we're paying through stormwater is it's a very efficient way to pick up phosphorus, which is, the major contributor for our stormwater permit. So we are required to remove phosphorus, and a lot of it's in leaves, so street sweeping is the most efficient way to do it. So we typically look to buy one.
Thank you, gentlemen. Further comments or questions? Hold on, don't leave. Ms. Minton?
I have to think of how I'm going to phrase my question, sorry.
Okay, that's fine. Any other comments or questions with reference to Article 27? Ms. Minton?
I'm sorry. If we get this purchase, will there be enough room in our current highway department building for 3 street sweepers?
Mr. Mizikar? Mr. Truman? Mr. Repecta?
Thank you. Yeah, we'll make sure there's room to house the piece of equipment inside.
Further comments or questions with reference to Article 27? Not hearing or seeing any, I'll call the vote. It requires a majority. All those in favor of Article 27 shall signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Article 28.
I move the printed motion under Article 28.
Second.
Finance Committee.
Finance Committee recommends Article 28 by a vote of 9-0.
Mr. Mizikar?
So there's 2 distinct portions to this capital improvement plan for the water department. So Article 28 seeks an appropriation of $97,500 for capital investments that is seen near the top of the screen there. And also a borrowing authorization of $18.5 million for the construction of a PFAS treatment facilities at the town's water treatment plant. The town has been approved to finance this project through the state's Clean Water Revolving Trust, which has the benefit of having a set standard interest rate of 2%. PFAS has, of course, been in the news a lot lately as the EPA has finalized their regulation, setting individual limits to particular compounds within this family of forever chemicals. While the town has always met the current standards, which have been set by the state's Department of Environmental Protection, we will not meet the EPA standards and have 5 years to come into compliance. When we originally were able to detect that we had PFAS within our drinking water system, we immediately notified the town in 2019 and have worked diligently sampling each and every quarter to understand those levels and also towards a solution, which we are seeking your authorization to borrow for this evening. So we've put ourselves in a great position to receive low-interest loans. Unfortunately, this is something that we have to take on in order to ensure compliance with the new EPA regulations. There's a 5-year time period where we have to come into compliance.
Thank you, Mr. Mizikar. Article 28, any comments or questions with reference to Article 28? Yes, thank you.
Maureen Harrington, Precinct 1. Just a question, what the impact this would be to the taxpayers? I did notice in my mailer recently that rates are going up for both water and sewer effective July, so can you talk with the town meeting members about the impact on bills? Thank you.
Mr. Mizikar.
Funding for this initiative itself would be within the proposed plan of maintaining water rates within 5% year over year. So we'll be ramping up the total debt obligations with, let's say, within the next 2.5 fiscal cycles. So a portion of those increases, which we're committed to not going over 5%, will be required for our debt service obligations.
There was a second question up there. Mr. Sigelnik.
John Sigelnik, Precinct 2. In the italics below the motion, it says doing this will allow the town to utilize the full permitted capacity of groundwater. I guess that, to me, the assumption means we're not using our full capacity now. So how far below the capacity are we? And is the capacity the 7 million gallons it refers to in the next sentence? And if we can get to our capacity, will that alleviate some of the restrictions we now have on water usage?
Mr. Mizikar.
I'm not sure that the reference to PFAS is the tie to the water capacity, but I'll let Mr. Rowley get us going on this one.
Mr. Rowley.
Superintendent, great question. So what the narrative in the italics means when we talk about it's going to be designed to treat 7 million gallons. So we're going to design, and we're in the process of designing the PFAS treatment plant. We're going to be able to put the full capacity of our water treatment facility through that treatment. So we can produce up to 7 million gallons design capacity in our treatment plant today. However, we're permitted through our Water Management Act on an annual basis of how much water we can put out, which is, top of my head, I think it's 4.16 million gallons. So we can't just simply put out 7 million gallons a day. There's a lot to it. You know, it's something we monitor every year. The water use restrictions that we see every year, despite drought, despite, you know, the rainiest summer on record, is part of our Water Management Act. So we are required to implement those every year, regardless of rainfall.
Thank you. Yes, question right down front.
Swydan, Precinct 6. How often does the EPA change its standards, and will this be sufficient going forward if they do change them again?
Thank you. Mr. Mizuka.
A question that I can't answer again. The EPA takes under consideration and has a program for unregulated contaminants. And PFAS is something that has popped up recently due to a number of factors, lawsuits, et cetera. So we're rather confident that the EPA's regulated level for PFAS won't change. I think the bigger question is there a new contaminant that they decide to establish regulatory control over?
We can't hear you, Carol.
Would it be sufficient going forward, this treatment? And correct, yep, sorry.
Dan?
Dan Rowley again, Water and Sewer Superintendent. That's a great question. It's hard to say, will this solve any future contaminants that the EPA may regulate. As Mr. Mizikar mentioned, every 5 years they have the unregulated contaminant monitoring rule, where they will go out and do testing for different contaminants that may be in the water, may not be in the water. We're in that process now. And PFAS a number of years ago was on the unregulated contaminant monitoring rule. The difference being that the lab science went from parts per billion to parts per trillion. So when we tested at parts per billion, we didn't have it. We were non-detect. When it went down to parts per trillion, that's when systems really started to see it, including Shrewsbury.
Thank you. There was a question right over here on the edge.
Jennifer Partial, Precinct 10. This is sort of a carry-on question, but what are the new regulatory limits for PFAS that the EPA has set? What are Shrewsbury's average PFAS levels for the last year or so? And what is the new design criteria? What are we trying to bring it down to?
Mr. Mizikar, Mr. Rowley.
Do I need to introduce myself again, or Dan Rowley, Water and Sewer Superintendent again. So the EPA has an individual limit of PFOS at 4 parts per trillion, an individual limit of PFOA at 4 parts per trillion, and then there's a hazard index of a number of other compounds. So Shrewsbury is just slightly over that. We're probably in the 5s for those 2 compounds individually. What we are currently under is the sum of the PFAS 6 under Mass DEP, and Shrewsbury, we fluctuate between 9 parts per trillion to 15 parts per trillion. The difference being in that number with the fluctuation is some of those we get to the non-detect and they don't count any part of it. So once you go to non-detect, you go from the 9 to the 15 on a couple of the compounds. So we've consistently been under that 20 parts per trillion throughout our monitoring when Mass DEP put that regulation in place.
One follow-up, come please. Stay right there, Dan.
I'm sorry, the third part of my question, do you have plans on what the new treatment system would bring it down to?
Mr. Rowley.
So it should go down to non-detect with the media that we use.
Thank you. Further comments or I'm sorry, did I miss something? Yeah, okay.
And what's the laboratory limit?
That's a good question. It's under 2 parts per trillion for a number of the compounds.
Okay, thank you.
Further comments or questions with reference to Article 28? Yes, yes.
Hi, Nicole Torres, Precinct 8. I'm wondering if the EPA offers a subsidization of this, or is that a part of the interest rate incentive for the loan?
Mr. Mizuka.
Revolving fund is federally funded and federally supported, so it does provide that low interest rate. The town, separate and apart from that, is pursuing our position through a class action lawsuit against DuPont and 3M to secure funding that would help offset this, and any of those dollars that we receive, where we can forego future expenses, including the cost of this treatment plant, we just wouldn't borrow for those funds.
Other comments or questions? Mr. Cray.
Robert Cray, Precinct 2. Could any of the experts comment on, in the cases of the lawsuits, what potential harm there's been to those plaintiffs from exposure to these chemicals, which we, for thousands of years, couldn't detect anywhere?
Mr. Mizuka.
So the plaintiffs in this are jurisdictions, they're water suppliers. So this is a complicated class action. They're not alleging any individual harms. They're trying to remedy the contamination levels within the supplies.
Do we know the interest, follow-on question, do we know the interest rate that the town will be paying that we're asking to pass on to taxpayers, please?
So it's 2%, and it is through the water rates, not the tax levy, just to be clear.
So that's roughly a couple $100,000 a year?
I'd have to look at the debt service schedule, but I can absolutely do that.
We'll take a second while he looks. Can you find it quickly?
Mm-hmm. What's that?
Maybe 180,000 at 2%? I can take that tomorrow if you prefer.
That's fine.
Thank you.
All right, very good. I saw another hand further up. No, right up in the middle there. Yes. Oh, just a second. I was speaking to the individual behind you. That's fine, no problem.
Yes, Linda Sarkisian, Precinct 4. I'm just curious when we might see this plant online, and would this be the total amount to remedy this situation?
Mr. Rowley.
Dan Rowley, Water and Sewer Superintendent. So we have completed pilot testing, identified the media we're going to use. We're in design of the facility now. We're probably 50% design. We would expect to start construction next year, and we're expecting 2 to 3 years for a construction time frame.
Okay, thank you.
Louise? Coming behind you.
Hi, Ms. Garone, Precinct 8. And please cut me off if a second follow-up question is not allowed. There's a significant difference between the limit of detection and the limit of quantitation for any assay. And just a cursory search indicated that the limit of detection published by the EPA is 0.5 to 6.5 nanograms per trillion. So if they set their standard at 4 parts per trillion, 4 nanograms per liter, then I would appreciate knowing how the limit of quantitation and the limit of detection of the tests that you plan to use are compare to the tests that are being used by the EPA.
Mr. Rowley.
Thank you.
Dan Rowley, Water and Sewer Superintendent. So that great question. That's probably a little bit outside of my expertise. However, we are required to use Massachusetts state-certified labs, and so they would use, the appropriate testing method, which off the top of my head I do not have.
Further comments or questions with reference to Article 28? Yes, sir.
Tom Luby from Precinct 2. I know we're seeking restitution or some sort of contribution from the manufacturers of these compounds, but is there any attempt to go after the source that's actually contaminating the water, the industry in the area that might be the source of these compounds?
Mr. Mizikar?
That could be a future option, but the levels of PFAS in the entire area and in all water sources is significant. Pretty much any subsurface drinking water well that's been tested in the Commonwealth has come back with PFAS in it, so it'll be very difficult to identify the specific source within our wells. It could be pursued, though.
Thank you.
Further comments or questions with reference to Article 28? Ms. Maycomber?
Hello, Caroline Maycomber, Precinct 9. It's my understanding that I think it was 2017, we spent $12 million for the initial construction of the home farm water treatment plant. So I'm just wondering why we can't just add additional filtration or services to that existing plant and why we need to build an entirely new building. Not sure who that would be a question for.
Mr. Rowley?
Dan Rowley, Water and Sewer Superintendent. Great question. So that facility that was constructed back in 2017, 2018 will stand, remain. It biologically removes manganese from the water, and we have some other chemicals that we add for corrosion control, pH adjustment. This will actually be a building right behind that, and it will be part of the treatment train where the water will still go through the biological manganese filters, and then it will go through these pressure vessels to remove PFAS.
Further comments or questions with reference to Article 28? Mr. Sigelnik? Okay.
Kind of following up on my permitted capacity. I think you said that we're allowed 4.1 million gallons per day. How close are we to that limit now? And maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but if we sign up for this MBTA thing and another 1,500 units come online, how much additional water are they going to use? And is that going to drive us over the 4.1 million?
Mr. Rowley?
Dan Rowley, Water and Sewer Superintendent. So our average use is on a rolling annual basis, and we're about 3.6 million gallons a day off the top of my head. So we still do have some capacity. Obviously future growth would be something to take into consideration. One thing I will say, I have colleagues in other water systems. One of the prudent things Shrewsbury did way back in the early 2000s was ban in-ground irrigation systems. So that is a major savior for this community in terms of seasonal water demand increases.
Thank you. Mr. Cray, we have an answer to one of your questions. Mr. Mizikar?
Interest in year one would be $366,243.94 based upon how we structure our debt, and it would decline each and every year thereafter, or each and every payment thereafter. We normally make 2 annual payments of principal and interest each year on a 20-year term. This is subject to how the state structures their debt, but it will likely be pretty close to that.
Further, Mr. Cray, follow up?
Craig, Precinct 2, separate question on this very important issue, obviously, here. Does Mr. Crowley know the size of the power service it's going to require to pump all this through the filtration system? Nothing is free. You're signing up here for a major increase in the carbon footprint of the town, and you're exporting it to other towns.
Mr. Rowley?
Dan Riley, Water and Sewer Superintendent. I do not know that at this point. We are still in design, so the electrical part of it has not been designed to the point we'd have that kind of information.
Sure. Supplement, Mr. Mizikar.
With regards to the carbon comment, I don't think that's true, though. We receive our power from Selco, and as everyone knows, Selco is on a net neutral plan by 2032. We have that extreme benefit that Selco's way out ahead of investor-owned utilities and other electric providers with regards to the carbon footprint that's associated with the production of the power that's used within the community.
Just a second, Mr. Cray, I'll come back to you. Let's see, we got Louise. Anybody else who has not had a chance to ask a question this evening? Louise.
I've seen on the town website reports of PFAS measures dating back a number of years. Have we kept samples? Because the EPA standard is based on a test which they released to the public on February of 2024. My suggestion from the scientific point of view would be to retest, if not all prior samples, a subset of the prior samples, to see how they compare to results from the new detection method and standards.
Thank you. Before going back to, go ahead.
Okay. Dan Riley, Water and Sewer Superintendent. No, we have not kept any of those samples, but it's certainly something I'd be interested in looking into in the future in terms of comparing results from one testing method to the other.
Before going back to Mr. Cray, anyone who has yet to ask a question? Mr. Cray.
Robert Cray, Precinct 2. Just that is an enviable position for Shrewsbury to buy green power, but it's also known as green mail in other circles. All power purchased in New England comes off the NEPOOL grid, which involves the 6 New England states, and it has a high portion of natural gas and carbon-producing power plants feeding into it. We're not an island from that. We are connected to the New England grid. So any power we use is partially either natural gas fed or other carbon-producing fuels.
Further comments or questions with reference to Article 28? Ms. Maycomber.
I'm sorry, Caroline Maycomber, Precinct 9. I just had a follow-up. I noticed in the boldface it mentions that we are authorized to borrow the $18,500,000, but it says the select board may apply for, accept, and expend any state or federal aid that is or may become available for these purposes. So I'm wondering, can't we wait and see what we will get from federal or perhaps EPA funding before we ask the taxpayers for $18.5 million? I just don't know what the timing would be to find out when that funding would be.
Mr. Mizikar.
I think the language that's proposed here puts us in the best situation either way. Look, we're dedicated to using anyone else's sources but Shrewsbury, and as those sources become available, we will apply those, whether it's through court settlements, through the class action lawsuits, or other grants. I promise you, on a day-to-day basis, we don't rest on our laurels in anything that we can leverage, whether it's working directly with our state legislators, or federal legislators to bring these sources into the community. And the language in this article allows us to ensure that we can move towards compliance. If we don't have this funding in place, we can't let a contract that will allow us to begin to improve the quality of the drinking water in Shrewsbury. All the while, I promise we will pursue every external source that we can. I'd say we can't delay. A 5-year window may seem like a long amount of time, but to construct a really technical plant like this, we need to keep moving at this point to ensure compliance.
Further comments or questions with reference to Article 28? Mr. Campanello.
Paul Campanello, Precinct 7. I'd like to move the question.
Question has been moved and seconded. This is not subject to debate. We will take a vote on it, and it is a majority vote. All those in favor of moving the question shall signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Nay. The ayes have it. We will now move to the vote on Article 28. It is a 2/3 vote. All those in favor of Article 28 shall signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. It passes. Article 29.
Under Article 29.
Second.
Finance Committee.
Finance Committee recommends Article 29 by a vote of 9-0.
Mr. Mizikar.
So Article 29 seeks to enter into an 18-year maintenance contract for water, for the water tank at the Oak Street, along Oak Street. Rather than fund one-time rehabilitation of the tank, this will provide for both interior and exterior maintenance of the tank. The maintenance program allows inspections, cleanings, touch-ups, and an overcoat of the tank halfway through the period. This approach also provides greater warranties than taking a more incremental approach. The Massachusetts general laws generally limits communities from entering into contracts for a time period greater than 3 years, but through this particular provision within Chapter 40B, Section 62, we are able to enter into this type of agreement, and we seek town meeting's authorization to do so. We already have funding in hand to be able to cover the cost of this maintenance program.
Comments or questions with reference to Article 29? Yes, sir.
Thank you. Naveen Jain, Precinct 4. Just a few questions. How is the tank being maintained right now?
Mr. Mizikar? Or Mr. Rowley?
So the Dan Rowley, Water and Sewer Superintendent. So the tank, we're doing the traditional exterior washing, interior clean-outs, but it's at the point where it needs to be completely rehabilitated, interior and exterior. It's been, I think, since the late 90s since it was done.
So
Follow-up, sir?
Yes, so with this contract, would our maintenance go to zero, separate from this contract?
Dan Rowley, Water and Sewer Superintendent. So it would include all of the maintenance that we would need. So interior inspections, clean-outs, exterior cleaning, and then they also take over, or they take responsibility for the overall condition of the tank through the duration of the contract. So if the paint fails, if it needs to be touched up, they will come in and do that. So the objective of this, going this route, in 15 years, that tank should look as good as, when we, first do the rehabilitation program.
Thank you. One last question. First of all, appreciate the reintroductions many times. Last question is, these funds were appropriated from previous town meetings. Has that money been set aside? How does that funding actually work for the life of that contract?
Mr. Mizikar.
The funding has been set aside through our general accounting process, where it's segmented off after actions the town meeting take using whatever the defined appropriating source was, in this case water rates. So it's just sitting there waiting for us to put this plan into action.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further comments or questions with reference to Article 29? Yes, Mr. Remington.
Dave Remington, Precinct 9. So a 15-year contract is pretty long. Normal contracts will be 1 year, then there's option years. So is this a 1-year contract with 14 option years and every year it's assessed, or is it a longer period of performance with no option years? How is that set up?
Mr. Mizikar, Mr. Rowley.
Dan Rowley, Water and Sewer Superintendent. So the way these contracts work, the upfront, the most significant portion of it is the first 3 years. So that really is the rehabilitation of the tank. So we are obligated for the first 3 years, and then after that, the town can cancel whenever they want.
Comments or questions with reference to Article 29? Not hearing or seeing anyone, we'll call the roll. This requires a 2/3 vote. All those in favor of Article 29 shall signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Article 29 passes. Article 30.
I move the printed motion under Article 30.
Second.
Finance Committee.
Finance Committee recommends Article 30 by a vote of 9-0.
Mr. Mizikar.
Article 30 proposes to revise funding sources previously approved by this body to fund the expansion of the cemetery. Specifically, we look to dedicate $1,316,328 that was borrowed for the Beal Elementary School construction project to offset funds that were going to be borrowed for the expansion of the cemetery. Using these funds will eliminate the need to borrow for the cemetery project, saving on future interest costs, using money that we've already borrowed and are currently incurring interest on, and ensure that we continue to maintain the most cost-effective way of moving forward with the cemetery expansion.
Questions and comments with reference to Article 30. Mr. Molina.
Jason Molina, Precinct 10. Question about the plans for the cemetery expansion. When do you anticipate that there will be, I guess, available lots to sell in the new place? And how many lots are remaining unsold in the existing space?
Who can do that question?
Hands are ready? What percentage?
Mr. Baldinger.
Keith Baldinger, Assistant Town Manager Operations. So currently we're in the comprehensive planning process for the cemetery. Construction is hopefully going to start this fall. It's probably a 2-year construction project to complete it. So we're probably looking at 2026, 2027 for first lot sales. I defer to Mr. Esposito if he knows the remaining lots left.
Mr. Esposito, any balance on hand?
Asking Justin.
Justin? Hold on, he's checking it. Thank you, Keith.
Justin Dobson, Assistant to Town Manager. Just a rough estimate, we have one row of 4 grave lots at Mountain View Cemetery in section QQ and 4 additional rows of 2 grave lots. There's about 9 graves in each lot. Been going about, I think, half to 2/3 of a lot per year, so I'm confident we have at least a few more years of capacity at Mountain View Cemetery. So I think the timing is good in terms of the availability of the lots at the new cemetery.
Thank you. Further comments or questions with reference to Article 30? Yes. Yellow card.
Sanam Zahir, Precinct 7. I have a question. I guess it's more of a comment. The voters that elected the Prop 2.5 override for the Beal Elementary School construction project, I imagine they would prefer to see these funds earmarked for another school construction project, like the expansion of the high school that will soon be coming up. I guess my question is why that is being diverted to a cemetery instead of a school construction project when those funds were raised specifically for school construction.
Mr. Mizikar.
So fortunately, this body controls the transfer of borrowed funds that are no longer needed for the designated purpose. So you hold that control as the legislative body, town meeting. Why I think it's important to use these funds now is because they're already accruing interest. And putting them to use and not borrowing additional dollars and incurring new interest I think is the most financially prudent way to approach this. As another school project comes to fruition, if it does, then we would look to acquire funds at that time. So it's truly a cost-saving initiative.
Comments or questions with reference to Article 30? Ms. Maycomber?
Thank you. Caroline Maycomber, Precinct 9. I kind of agree with what the last person had to say, and I'm just thinking as we went through the school budget, I'm sure we could find somewhere that $1,316,328 could be put to good use for our schools and for our students. Fortunately for myself, I'm not quite thinking of buying a cemetery plot just yet, but I just imagine, to her point, that we did borrow these funds for a purpose of the schools, and while legislatively, yes, we could choose to appropriate them to another funding need, I think it would be prudent and appreciated by the taxpayers, especially those with children in the schools, that this money be used for the schools. That's all. So not really a question, more just a comment. Thank you.
Mr. Mizikar?
So the funds can only be used for initiatives where you can borrow for a like duration of time. So just to be clear, these funds could not be used for any minor improvements or costs. The value of the asset and the investment would have to be similar to what the funds were originally set aside for, which was the construction of a school on a 20-year borrowing term. So it has to be a significant capital investment. Definitely could never be used for operations or small equipment purchases. That's why we're looking at a project that has a similar, which is a substantial asset investment within the community, because the funds are limited for a like borrowing parameter.
Further comments or questions with reference to Article 30? Mr. Cray?
Robert Cray, Precinct 2. Do I understand this correctly, that the whole town is paying for this, but the benefits accrue only to those plot owners?
Mr.
Those who
Mizikar?
purchase the plot are the only ones who benefit. May they rest in peace. But the whole town is paying for it in tax base.
So the town is obligated under the general laws to provide for cemetery for those who perish within the community. We're meeting this obligation by expanding the cemetery. Sure, it is limited to those who buy plots, but it is an obligation of the municipality to provide that for the community.
Follow-up?
Is the intended cost per plot designed to, or calculated to recover the costs from those who purchase it? The full costs?
We're not structuring a debt model associated with the sale of the lots. I don't know if anyone could speak to the total number of lots that are being put in the cemetery. The total cost of the project is about $4 million.
For how many plots?
Who knows the design of the new cemetery?
We're working on that.
Thank you.
Further comments or questions with reference to Article 30? Yes.
Deb Delgado, Precinct 8. I just want to clarify. It's my understanding that you cannot buy a plot in advance currently. Okay. Just because I was looking into getting one for a son-in-law who's in the service in case it was ever needed. Hopefully it never will be, but so that'll be like 3 years out before you can buy in advance.
Well, once we have the design and we begin construction and we have ability to provide plans and work with those who may be interested, we would go back to the Parks and Cemetery Commission and ask them when they would like us to begin pre-sales for the new sections. Okay. So it may not be, it could be shorter than that 3-year period.
Okay, thank you.
Right behind Deb.
Hey, Justin.
Bridget Hilton, Precinct 8. I think I said 7 by mistake before, my bad. I understand what you're saying, Mr. Mizikar, about using the money towards a project of a similar scope, but we just approved an $18.5 million borrowing for the development of the PFAS plant. Would it be possible to use that money towards that project and reduce additional borrowing that we have to do in the town? I mean, I feel like that's similar scope.
That's the proposal for this.
Proposing to use it for the cemetery. I'm saying, could you use it for not the cemetery, but for the PFAS plant, so we borrow less money for that?
In theory, yes.
You could, in theory, do that. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Stefan Hess, Precinct 8. I move the question.
Motion has been made and seconded to move the question. This is not subject to debate. We'll move to an immediate vote. Requires a majority. All those in favor of moving the question signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. We will now call the vote on Article 30. This requires a simple majority. All those in favor of Article 30 shall signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed shall say no. The ayes have it. Article 31.
I move the printed motion under Article 31.
Second.
Finance Committee.
Finance Committee recommends Article 31 by a vote of 9-0.
Mr. Mizikar.
Article 31 seeks to transfer $286,140.70 that was received from class action lawsuit settlements into the opioid special revenue fund. These funds can only be used for substance abuse prevention, and they became a part of free cash because of a technicality under state law at the time that required for them to be appropriated. The legislature has since taken action to resolve this technical issue, but we need to move these funds, since they can only be expended for those purposes, into this special revenue account. Future actions like this will not be required because of the change in state law.
Comments or questions with reference to Article 31? Article 31, comments or questions? Not hearing or seeing any, I'll call the vote on this. It's a simple majority. All those in favor shall signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? It passes. Article 32 is a citizen's petition. So I will ask the petitioner, also a member of town meeting, Krista Dupre, to move Article 32. Krista? Could you move Article 32, please?
Sure. I make a motion to move Article 32.
Is there a second? Motion has been made and seconded. Finance Committee.
Finance Committee does not recommend passage of Article 32 by a vote of 9-0.
The petitioners have a presentation that... Oh, yes. I have a recommendation of the Planning Board, which... Do you have it? Which recommended against this article, 1 in favor and 2 opposed. Would the petitioners like to give their presentation? They've agreed that 5 minutes is sufficient. We will then open it to questions.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. We're representing residents that have come forward with a citizen's petition asking town meeting members to rezone Article 32's listed parcel to commercial business. We believe the current zoning is extremely concerning, since this entire area is in the Aquifer Overlay District. These parcels had been zoned commercial business for many years till town meeting rezoned during the pandemic in August of 2020. We believe commercial businesses offer less risk, therefore more protection to the aquifer recharge area than limited industrial businesses. Next slide. This is a general overview of districts throughout town. Point of location and reference to the northwest corner is the Aquifer Overlay District, also referred to as APOD. Next slide. In the APOD, it is intended to protect public health and safety by minimizing contamination of shallow superficial aquifers and preserving and protecting existing and potential sources of drinking water supplies. Please reference the Aquifer Protection Overlay District map that was included in your packet. Next slide. As you can see on the screen, the arrow is pointing to Zone 2 as a general overview where these parcels are located in the APOD. The area we would like to highlight is the applicability. The Aquifer Protection Overlay District shall be considered as overlying other zoning districts. Any area within this Aquifer Protection Overlay District is subject to more restrictive designation of either the overlay or the underlying district. Uses not permitted in the underlying district shall not be permitted in the overlay districts. Next slide. Definition of limited industrial. This is a brief comparison. Is intended for use by research laboratories, office buildings, and light industries. And definition of commercial business intended to provide goods and services for transients or tourists and non-consumer goods and services. Please note, this is a general overview of the zoning district for each of them. Each of them has a number of desirable appropriate uses that are permitted, provided all of the required approvals, permits are obtained, and processes followed from various boards. The key takeaway from these lists is commercial businesses would still provide a commercial tax base and better protection to the aquifer recharge area, Zone 2, and wellhead Zone 1, since limited industrial uses potentially have greater risks. Please refer to the colored maps in your packet. Next slide. The left map is the current zoning. The right map, pink area, is the proposed area to rezone. We have to ask ourselves what would happen if the aquifer was contaminated from uses permitted in the limited industrial zoning. What would Shrewsbury do for their water? Next slide. A reference from an EPA document. Zoning is probably the most widely employed method of protecting groundwater. Zoning is used to control the type of development allowed in a particular area and to separate incompatible land uses. Also, protecting groundwater is to zone the area for land use activities that pose little to no threat to the resource, such as low-density residential development, certain types of commercial uses, or open space. Next slide. The aquifer has been a main concern for many years, with numerous mentions in the 2001 and 2016 master plan. In the 2016 master plan, it was stated at a public forum, I quote, "By protecting the northwest corner of Shrewsbury, which is over the town's main aquifer, the town can implement groundwater protection and conservation efforts. The property can be used for passive recreation." Also, as far back as 1997, Shrewsbury Open Space and Recreation Plan goals and objectives, they state under goal number 5, protect the town's potable drinking water sources. Permanently protect more land in the area of Lake Quincy watershed, and to protect the surface and groundwater supplies. Also on page 113 worksheets, the land between Route 70 and Holden Street Extension are crucial parts of the recharge area for the aquifer that provides 70% of Shrewsbury's drinking water. Lastly, we believe rezoning this commercial business is more in line with the town's All in Shrewsbury, which is Shrewsbury's collective action for sustainable future. All in Shrewsbury is guided by 5 focus areas. And we believe this rezoning falls under the focus area of vibrant natural resources, an identification strategy to protect and enhance Shrewsbury's tree canopy, open space, and also the action item of restore, protect wetlands, buffer zones along local bodies of water to improve quality and enhance wildlife habitat. Next slide. We would like to thank the town manager staff, town moderator, planning department staff as their assistant, as well as the select board finance committee for allowing the process for a citizen's petition to be brought forward to town meeting for consideration and vote. Thank you for your attention.
On Article 32, are there any comments or questions for the petitioners or others regarding Article 32, the zoning change? Yes, Ms. McManus. Yes, you do.
Sandy McManus, Precinct 10. I thought I read somewhere that this article was going to be moved to the fall special town meeting. Did I
No, I don't
read
believe
that
so.
wrong?
No, these folks have done the initiative petition for this evening. Further comments or questions regarding Article 32? Yes.
Diane Jones, Precinct 8. So I just wanted to say, in addition to talking about the aquifer, there are a number of people who live right next to this piece of property where these warehouses are proposed. And what concerns me is I do not know exactly how we got in this position, but their property values are going to be affected by the warehouses. There's going to be a lot of trucks coming through. There's going to be a lot of noise. There will be light pollution at night. All those things are going to reduce the value of their properties, and that's pretty serious. But in addition, the diesel fumes from the trucks. Diesel exhaust is associated with a lot of health problems. For children, asthma, there's no question. Within a half mile, much higher asthma rates for children, and that's for a lifetime. And in fact, as kids get older, they get to be my age and older, they lose lung capacity. And that's just a nightmare. In addition, for people who are already older, it increases COPD. This is a major health problem, and I don't think that it is an intended consequence. I think this is an unintended consequence. And I'm very concerned about the people who live in this neighborhood. I'm not sure what to do about it, but that's a comment that I need to make. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Further comments or questions with reference to Article 32? Right down front.
Ed Bolter, Precinct 1. So we just got done spending $18 million to clean up the current pollution issue facing us, and now we're talking about allowing construction of something that may introduce more pollution to our water systems. It just seems to me irresponsible to do that. I don't know, yeah, it looks like the water department person is still here. Does this filtration system you're building cover all sorts of contaminants, or would we need to build yet another water treatment facility for any kind of mishaps at this site?
Mr. Rowley, we all know who you are.
So the PFAS treatment plant will specifically remove PFAS. So in terms of any other contaminants, it wouldn't be designed for that.
Follow-up, Mr. Mizikar.
A couple of things on that to your question. So the Aquifer Protection Overlay District does restrict what can occur within the building, what can be stored there, types of activities that can go on within the building. So it's a layer of regulation that has been in place in town to preserve and protect the quality of the aquifer system. This is not this is a project that's going through the planning board, and to ensure that our drinking water source is protected, all provisions of the Aquifer Protection Overlay District will be in place. The stormwater requirements for the site are very stringent, and have been designed to exceed all required capacities that would generally be associated with the development that has been proposed. So I just want to go back to the prior comment, how did we get here? Town meeting did authorize the commercial business zone to be changed to an industrial business zone at the August 2020 town meeting, and also alterations to the industrial business zone in May of 2022. increasing the allowable height. These two changes were certainly vetted through our entire process. It came before this body and both were approved. I think there are implications that need to be considered by this body if you're gonna change the zoning back. I think changing zoning to prevent a particular type of use that is permitted under the existing zoning will have a chilling effect on development within the community, and could be concern where we strive each and every day to build the commercial tax base in this community to offset the cost of the residential tax base. This is something that I would have concerns with. As a final point, I feel it's my obligation to advise this body that the current property owner has made a preliminary subdivision filing with the town, and this affords the developer 7 months to file a definitive subdivision and have it approved by the planning board. With these actions, they would preserve their right to the zoning that was in place on the day that they filed for the preliminary subdivision, which was a couple weeks ago. So therefore, in essence, a zoning change this evening, as long as those steps are followed through on by the property owner, changing the zoning would not preclude this project. Certainly, my final comment is we are doing everything appropriate to regulate and control our aquifer to ensure the drinking water is sourced. It's obviously something that we take very serious and would not put into jeopardy. You know, the protections of the Aquifer Overlay Protection District will have to be met. Again, that includes what can happen within any buildings, types of materials that can be stored there or cannot be stored there. There are specific exclusions. So when it comes to how we got here and what's currently on the table this evening, I think I do have concerns with changing the zoning to prevent a particular use. And just a reminder that the current owner has done those filings. So don't take that as me advising the body not to change the zoning. If you see the project continue after this meeting, if there was a vote to change it back and the project continues, I just wanted this body to be aware in advance that that could be permissible.
Mr. Ryan, petitioner.
Robert Ryan, A Colonial Drive, attorney. I created the idea of the citizens petition to change zoning. Mr. Mizikar has been very helpful. At 5:38 Tuesday night, Amici Tutoria, eating with my son, I got broadsided with the subdivision filing, and I have a legal team I've been talking to, and we wholeheartedly disagree with the town manager. I could not speak at the select board meeting. A major problem with the subdivision filing is to be required by state law to be filed with the Zoning Board of Appeals. I was confirmed by town manager the other day. It was filed with the town clerk. So if this goes to court, the court will not get to the issue of whether or not there is an extension of zoning. The court will simply rule you did not file it properly. So I don't know, I heard tonight the subdivision is going to the planning board. The chapter that it was filed under, basically it does not have to abide by local zoning, and therefore by statute it has to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals. So I submit that you do need to vote yes tonight. I disagree that I've heard the select board, and some of them are mad at me, saying that we are saying no to business. No, we are saying no to a disaster of destroying our aquifer. As Mrs. Dupre said, there's many other businesses that come in that are less environmentally harmful. So I do ask for a unanimous yes vote tonight.
Further comments or questions with reference to Article 32?
I think Stephen should speak to
Mr. Gooley. Here comes Bill.
Thank you. Bill Gooley, Precinct 8. I have to say, when I first heard about this project, I was as opposed to it as you sound tonight. And I talked with a lot of people, and they kept having answers for my questions. So I read the very lengthy and detailed project proposal, which is online. And I have to say I was extremely impressed by what a thorough job they had done of taking into account all of the concerns about water, sound, light, and traffic, and any other thing that would came up. And they also worked with the DEP, they worked with the town, they worked with the city of Worcester, they worked with any of the alphabetical agencies that you can think of that would in any way be connected to this kind of project, and have managed to meet the requirements proposed by all of those agencies, all of those entities. And we have to think of what exists there now, and is that actually a worse polluting situation than would happen after this is done, when this project would put in all kinds of protections for the water, ways to eliminate or manage the sound that might affect the neighborhood, the same with lights. They've proposed a lot of traffic improvements, road improvements, that would do much to handle the traffic that's going to that project, but would also make a big difference at the intersection of Main Street and Holden Street, as well as 3 or 4 intersections on Route 70. So I have come around to the view that this is actually an improvement ecologically as well as in business terms. If you haven't read that, I really suggest you do it. It's pretty dense and pretty long, but it's also extremely impressive. One gets the impression that these people who are doing the project have a concern for those of us who live here, and are also going out of their way to make absolutely sure that they have found ways to answer, not just to answer your questions, but to show you what they will do to actually fix that problem, okay? We're not going from paradise with the Worcester sand and gravel people. We're going from something that's really not very protective of the aquifer or of the rest of the area around there. And it is actually not as close to Main Street and to Holden Street as I first thought, because if you go on Holden Street, you can actually take a turnoff that's built there and see where the wells are. But that's not where this is going.
Could you wrap this up, Bill, and then we'll come back to you for further
Yeah,
comment?
so I just want to say that this is way more complicated than we thought, but also the people who are proposing it know how to do these extremely complicated things and make things better than they already are. That's what it looks like to me. Thank you.
Mr. Sigelnik, did you have your card up? Sure, let's get John in and then we'll come back. No, John's yielding the floor to you, that's fine. Krista, go right ahead.
There we go. Thank you for your comments. I appreciate that. Those of you that have been following the planning board process or have visited the town website, absolutely, this company is known for doing this type of work, 100%. However, our concerns are that this area is over the aquifer. That is the #1 reason that for our concern, and that it is limited industrial. Have they done work over aquifer or watershed areas? Yes, they have. However, this is our main source of drinking water. What would happen if something happened there? That's our main concern. Are there reports as well as peer reviews all online? We're not discrediting any of the work that town has done and worked with, as well as the partner. But we have to think back, personally as a town meeting member, I think back to Oak, the lawn of Oak during the pandemic and when this was voted on. And we were informed differently that this was going to potentially be a research and development facility.
Mr. Sigelnik.
John Sigelnik, Precinct 2. When I came here this evening, I was somewhat on the fence. This is more a comment than a question. In listening to Mr. Mizakar's presentation, that because the owner has filed, it would still go through even if we voted yes for this. I guess in my mind, would it make more sense then to vote yes for this? Only because if this particular project were to fall through, then somebody will come back with another project. But if we vote to rescind the zoning, it would die if this particular project died, and someone would not be able to come back and present the same type of an issue because it would now be rezoned property.
Further comments or questions with reference to Article 32? Yes. You're right there.
Jennifer Partial, Precinct 10. A couple quick questions about the Aquifer Protection Act and the overlay. How deep are our town wells? And what kind of limits do they have? Because some chemicals will float on the water surface, where the water surface in Massachusetts is probably somewhere between 5 and 20 feet. And the wells are probably pumping at 300, 400, 500 feet below grade. You know, are we prohibiting things that could sink, like vinyl chloride, PCE, TCE? Is that part of that limited business district? And I guess, what are we worried about spilling and hurting the aquifer? Is it diesel from the trucks? Because that will just float on the water surface up at 5 to 10 feet below grade. You can go dig it out. It's not going to get to the well. I'm hoping.
Yes, we will find him.
We'll get some answers,
And we'll ask
but that's
Mr.
sort of my comments and questions.
That's fine. We'll ask Mr. Rowley to answer your question.
I won't introduce myself again. So in terms of our wells, they're not that deep. They're 60 to 80 feet. So they're really not all that deep.
There was also a question, I believe, to the petitioner regarding concerns.
Obviously, with an unknown use, for example, they still don't have a tenant. But there's uses in industrial uses that can be harmful. Even for example, currently, if there are trucks, what if there's a truck fire, for example? The fire department and what they use and what would be going down the drains, because that's not limited. The other thing to think about is what is coming on site, and that's not regulated as well. And there's different uses.
Follow up.
I guess I'm hoping to hear more about the Aquifer Protection Act or overlay. I don't have the right language, but Mr. Mizikar said that there were restrictions. And does that include the types of chemicals? Because yes, hearing that the wells are 60 to 80 feet below grade, I wouldn't, I worked on sites that were PCE, TCE, vinyl chloride. They go down 100 feet easily. So I want to know more about the Aquifer Protection Act and what we already have in place that would limit what's being used there.
Mr. Mizikar, who could give us a more in-depth brief on the overlay district? Mr. McGoldrick.
Christopher McGoldrick, Director of Planning and Economic Development. So the Aquifer Protection Overlay District is an overlay district that goes over our aquifer area as it's been mapped back in 2018. What that district does, regardless of if it's the limited industrial or commercial business, that Aquifer Protection Overlay District is in place for projects within that district. They're subject to those requirements, which put further restrictions on use, depending upon which zone, whether it's Zone 1, Zone 2, or Zone 3 within that district. Those zones are directly related to the distance from the wellheads and provide stricter use restrictions for anything proposed depending upon that proximity to the wellheads. So again, the current proposal is subject to the Aquifer Protection Overlay and is seeking a special permit under that provision.
Satisfied with the question, with the answer?
Chris McGoldrick, Director of Planning and Economic Development. So there's specific hazardous waste materials or hazardous materials that are identified and referenced through the bylaw. I don't know about that specific chemical, but if it's classified as a hazardous material, it would not be allowed to be stored or brought on site.
Further comments or questions with this reference? Peter, I believe, I see his face. Mr. Collins.
Hi, Peter Collins, Precinct 4, also Chair of the Lake Quinsigamond Commission. And speaking for the lake, I kind of really see the biggest, I think, danger to the Lake Quinsigamond and the watershed, which is this falls under, is runoff and the outfalls that we have coming into the lake. I don't really see changing the zoning to commercial to be any, it's kind of neutral. It's just neutral. It's not really going to change anything that far. I mean, we're getting a tremendous amount of runoff and, sourcing bad stuff coming out of Lincoln Plaza and coming off of Belmont Street, the hospital properties. So it really, I don't really see the only way to really change, and I'm not proposing this, but would be not to build anything there. And that would be the safest thing to do, but I don't see that as being feasible, and that's not what I'm proposing. But I think that changing the zoning to commercial is just another potential, to have the same thing. And in fact, in the late '80s, there was a project called the Pyramid Mall that was proposed there, and no one wanted that either. So, that's kind of where we are. So, I would vote to defeat this.
Thank you, Peter. Further Mr. Samian.
Actually, thank you, Mr. Collins, for mentioning the Pyramid Mall. My recollection was it was slightly different, but I think it's important for the town meeting body to think about this, going to the point that Mr. Mizikar raised. About 35 years ago, we had an opportunity in this community to get some commercial development. It was through the Pyramid Mall, which is now where the United States Postal Distribution Center is, and a residential neighborhood was. We had a chance to get commercial income at the time and chose not to as a community, and we had a lot of development after that. I think it's very important when we work with commercial developers and collaboratively work with them to try to get a project that we believe will improve the community, that we stay the course. There's a lot of, I don't want to get into what the planning board's looking at, but it's obviously regulatory. There's a MEPA process, DEP, DOT, Aquifer, all of those are going to be involved here. But in this instance, we've heard a lot about the residential tax rate tonight, and we've heard about whether or not the model that we have will carry us forward in terms of the override stabilization account and the long-term model that we have there. But what's important here is we are going to get economic positive revenue from this. of $500,000, and that adds up. And it's just important to follow through. And a lot of the things have been, appear to be addressed. Again, a lot of this is through the planning board, of a noise buffer, of light, of traffic, and all of those as well. I just think it's important in this instance as well that when it came in front of this body back in 2020 and again in 2022, there were a lot of materials, and we deliberated, and we came to the conclusion that changing the zoning to limited industrial was okay, and it came back overwhelmingly so in 2022 again to increase the height, to have it to be Class A warehouse space again, same thing, that it passed overwhelmingly. So I want to point that out, that we have deliberated as a body on this and overwhelmingly agreed that the change to limited industrial was okay. And that's what I'd recommend we stay the course on. Because again, going forward, as we want to offset the burden on residential taxpayers, we want to get more commercial revenue. And just, if I may, just one other thing to Mr. Ryan, just want to clarify, we're not mad at you. I don't know where you got that from. We actually did allow you to come talk to one of our select board meetings. We did. Remember that you and Ms. Dupre presented to us, and I'm not recalling when you weren't allowed to present. So I just wanted to clarify.
I never said I wasn't allowed to present.
Okay, I thought I heard
Sorry.
that.
No,
Hey,
I
Bob,
just.
Bob, thank you. Thank you.
But
That
I'll go
was
to you
my
for a second.
thought. So thank you, for Mr. Moderator, for that
Yes, you can.
opportunity.
I was on town meeting, August 8, 2020. I wasn't here. I was the deputy moderator. Nobody was with me. Oh, not here. Yeah, here. I voted for this, and I regret that, because at the time, I thought I was getting R&D, which is going to bring in more than $500,000 a year. So I submit that if other development is done commercial, we can get more than $500,000 a year. And I don't think we're telling businesses don't come. We want the right kind of business.
Further comments or questions with the reference? Gentleman up in the aisle.
Good evening, Anthony Mastromateo, precinct number 10. This may be an exercise of futility here, but I will do it just to entertain the room. I would like to make a motion, and if there is a second in this room, to move this article to read as change it from industrial to residential 1. Do I have a second?
Okay. Dadine, I think you were next, and then I went over in another direction. Did you still have a question? You're set, or? Oh, please, okay.
Dadine Garnett, Precinct 2. Worcester Sand and Gravel has been operating, I believe it's one of the oldest companies in the history of Shrewsbury, and it's been operating for somewhere in the 100-year category.
After World War I.
Do we have any historical data as to whether or not there's been any accidents that have caused problems to the aquifer?
Who could answer that?
Any historical data from anybody?
I don't know of anyone. I don't know.
I think that we would have that.
But hold on. Don, are you asking to be? You can answer the question? Oh, then please do. Donna O'Connor. Thought you were getting ahead to be recognized. Okay, well, once we're done.
Hi, Donna O'Connor, Precinct 2. The contamination that was coming towards our wells came from the Worcester area. It did not come from Worcester Sand and Gravel. It came from, I don't know if I can even name the places, but there, yes. But there was, no, I know the name of it. I don't know other. So there were a variety of issues, and it was all related to carelessness that in those days people didn't worry about, and they should have. And it was coming towards our wells, but we stopped it. It was not Worcester Sand and Gravel.
Retain the mic. Go ahead, Dadine.
So I just wanted to just reassure everybody that this company has been there all these years. These trucks have been coming and going, a lot of contractors, and now this company is coming to town, and they have reassured us that they're going to be bringing even more safety measures. They're going to be cleaning up this site, and they're going to be bringing commercial tax dollars, which we desperately need. I am extremely, I really feel for the neighbors up there. I really do. That's a lot of traffic that's coming. But we also, I was here. I voted for this change. We knew what we were getting. We talked about the arms, we talked about the building height, and we voted for this. Honestly, we knew what we were getting. It was part of the whole discussion. And I'm having a really hard time thinking about changing what we've already approved. This company asked us to do this. We've already done this, and I have a really hard time changing the zoning that we've already changed for this already. So I vote to not change this zoning back. Thank you.
Certainly, point of, yes? Can you stand up, Tony? I heard no second, sorry. Oh, I didn't hear a second. I didn't hear the second. Sorry about that. Yes.
Residential 1. So if you don't know what residential 1 is, we just if you $2 homes up there. That's going to generate tax revenue. It's going to protect the water treatment here. A developer can still make money.
Okay, hold on 1 second, Tony. Okay, so I heard your initial motion to go to residential 1. I did not hear anyone. Oh, that's fine. I just didn't hear you. So.
Anthony Mastromateo, Precinct 10. So just the point of order there is I think I calculated that I've been here for 16 years doing this. So this is my first one of these, but I've made an amendment. It has been seconded over here, and I'd like to make that as a vote right now, and I believe that is a point of order that we have to go to a vote for that.
Would you please write your amendment on paper so that
Yes.
we can actually evaluate it? Thank you. Just 1 second. I didn't hear the second. Exactly. Can you bring it forward, Tony?
Yes. That's okay. Sorry. All I'm really doing is changing commercial to rural residential 1.
Okay. So he's changing. Ladies and gentlemen of town meeting, if you would refer to page 44, Article 32 by petition. Motion has been made and seconded to strike commercial business and insert in its place rural residential 1. Motion has been made and seconded for that amendment. All those, I will now call the vote unless there's discussion within. Anyone would like to discuss this? Beth? To amend is a, hold on. To amend is a majority. Just want to confirm that. No, to amend is a majority. It's ultimately the vote on whether or not the zoning would prevail or not is a 2/3. Any discussion on the motion offered to amend Charlie Garabedian?
I would definitely recommend to the entire meeting that anything to protect our water supply is a positive thing. Because they say that this new company is going to protect our water system. Do they give a probability of their success in protecting water systems. If they give me a probability of 1, I would say we have business. They gave me a probability of 0.99, I'd say no, I'm not going to take that kind of risk with my water system. Our quality of life in Shrewsbury is at stake from where I sit. I'm an old man, and I could say I don't care because I'm going to die tomorrow. But I care about the young people, the future of this town. It is slipping away. And if we let it slip away, we can never retrieve what we have and we've had in the past. So with that, let us make this a nice residential area. You will essentially reduce any possibility of complications with their water aquifer. You will eliminate all these trucks. You will eliminate noise. You will eliminate lights. You will eliminate air pollution. This is serious business, and we're doing it for the sake of money. Our money is no good. Once we die, you are at 0. But if you will live, you can also be at 0 if you don't have health. I rest my case.
On the motion to, guys, come on. On the motion to strike commercial business and insert rural residential 1, Mr. Mizikar?
To the prior gentleman's comments, I think town meeting needs to take into consideration that a change to residential zoning district would more than likely mean whatever number of homes are put in place there, that they would have septic systems. And those septic systems will leach into the drinking water system. The developer of this project is running sewer to the site. So I just want town meeting members to be aware of that.
Mr. Convery, did I see a card up? On the matter of the amendment.
Pat Convery, Precinct 10. I think most town meeting members are already aware that residential development brings with it a lot of environmental harm. I mean, between lawn chemicals and septic systems and cars and burning fossil fuels to heat their buildings. But at the same time, they bring a very important financial impact to the town. It's, in my experience, they're tax negative. They cost us a lot more than they bring in taxes. They really don't represent what we would call economic development in the town. So I would say though, but if we do want to maintain open space and forego both the environmental impacts and the tax revenue, I think we should be honest about it and, you know, just deed the whole thing open space. Thank you.
The guys, come on. We have a question on the amendment. Mr. Pitney.
Patrick Pitney, Precinct 5. Mr. Moderator, in order to consider this amendment, would we need a recommendation from 1, the Finance Committee, and 2, the Planning Board?
You can do it. It's nice to have those, but you don't need them.
Okay.
They've had as much time as anybody else.
All right. Thank you.
Gentlemen along the aisle.
Tony Bonaventura, Precinct 4. How many acres is this land, and what is the zoning for rural residential? What's the size of the lots?
Rural residential 1. Mr. McGoldrick, what size are the lots?
So there is no rural residential 1 zoning district in the town. You'd have to define if it's rural A, rural B, residence A, residence B1, or residence B2.
Tony, what do you say to that?
Or me?
Yes, go ahead. You made the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I would be seeking what that definition would be from the town engineer as the most stringent and the most frontage lot to be able, 1, to put septic systems up there if that's what needs to happen. so that we can stay away and keep buffers in place and intact. So the question does go back to the town engineer of, to define that rural residential 1 is a sort of a Massachusetts term. But what I would be looking for is what the town definition of that most stringent and largest lot size would be for that. Thank you.
So the gentleman wants to amend his motion to be what, Mr. McGoldrick?
Sorry, it's a little bit more complex of a question. I'm just,
I understand.
I want to confirm that we have the largest lot area, I believe is the question, so.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, I'm Patty Sheehan, zoning enforcement officer and building inspector. So rural A, rural B, and residence A has the lot size of 20,000 square feet with 125 feet of frontage. So those sizes are all the same for lot size and frontage.
Okay, Patty, can you say that very slowly? So what is the action, instead of rural residence 1, what would the amendment read?
So rural A, rural B, and residence A all have the same frontage requirement and lot size.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, Tony, I take it that your actual amendment is to strike commercial business and insert thereof residence A, B, and residence, rural A, B, and residence A.
That is correct. That would be for conforming lots to those requirements as set forth by the town.
Okay, pick a district, buddy. We can only have one district. Patty, which accomplishes his objective? Residence A?
So residence A then, thank you.
There you go. We're going with residence A, folks. Okay, there were Ms. O'Connor.
I had a follow-up.
Oh, 1 second, Donna. Go ahead.
So I had a follow-up. So the current disturbed area, how many acres is it? I believe the buildings are like almost 1 million square feet. So what's the total acre size? That
About 180, right? 185 or so?
Just a second.
Is it 185?
What question are you answering?
So I actually have a clarification. There is a district that is much lesser used, rural AA. It actually has the largest lot area for one-family uses at 45,000 minimum lot area.
Rural AA is now the
Rural-
gentleman's motion?
Rural AA.
Just 1 second. Do we have an acres? The area appears to be 123 acres. Okay?
And I just have one other question. Did the previous owner approach the town to sell a portion or all of this lot at all? Did that ever occur?
No is the response.
Thank you.
Donna O'Connor. On the motion.
On the motion, I think we're jumping all over the place. We're trying to make decisions on something that we voted on twice already, and now we've jumped from changing back to houses with no planning, no advice from the planning board, no advice from legal as far as how the town would be exposed by changing anything at this point with the company, with the business loss, how much we would be paying besides for the houses and the people in them and all the expenses. We'd be paying for lots of legal issues here. But what I stood to say before, I'm going to say now. My mother-in-law lives on Newton Pond. She's lived in that area for her 93 years. She is excited about this property being developed as planned. She's not worried about how it impacts her, and her house is the closest to this property on the side towards Newton Pond. It's the only house there. And she never saw a sailboat. People don't go there swimming unless they live there. It's a very quiet pond. She's not worried about it getting contaminated because the people that will be building have to follow all of the laws, aquifer protection, what the planning board puts in place, and they've done everything they can to do this right for us. And we're going to mess it up if we start voting for all these other things just because it's 10:30 at night and we want to go home. We need to do this right. So either we stop talking about it tonight and put it for another time, or we just vote this down. Listen to the town manager and listen to Mr. Samia, because they're telling you the accurate information.
Further comments or questions with reference to the motion to amend? Yes, sir.
I understand that this aquifer, Raju Palapati, Precinct 4. I understand this aquifer supplies 70% of our required water. So my question is, what is the backup plan? Either ways, what is the backup plan?
What would be our backup plan, Mr. Mizikar, regardless of the zoning question? Dan?
So in the event of an emergency for our water system, we have a interconnection with Worcester that can provide the town with water. So whether it's something on this parcel or some other issue with the water system, that is the town's backup plan.
Mr. German? Motion has been made to move the question. Is there a second? Second, okay. So I want to make sure everybody understands what we're doing. Go to page 44, Article 32. In the third line down, commercial business would be removed, and in place thereof, rural AA. So from limited industrial zoning district to the rural AA zoning district. Are we moving, all those in favor of moving the question shall signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it, the question is moved. We are now voting on the gentleman's edit to Article 32. Is everyone clear on what it is? Okay, all those in favor of the suggested edit shall signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. It does not pass. We are now therefore back to the original text on Article 32. Yes? We need a mic. Thank you.
Lisa Papazian, Precinct 3. This is a very important article that we are debating on tonight. And I am concerned about the time. We're not fresh in terms of being able to think about the decisions and the impact that this is going to have on the residents. So I have 2 points. One is we are thinking about commercial use of this land, but at what cost to the residents who are living there? And when does quality of life outweigh the commercial use? And 2, since it is so late, I'm not sure about rules for town meeting, but is it possible to table this conversation and bring it back tomorrow night when we're a fresh body?
We're underway in debate, and and therefore we need to vote it up or vote it down. Further comments or questions?
Dean?
Yes, hold on.
I just want to respond to the Dean. I can't speak, Dean, to the aquifer being damaged, but I have a call into the EPA last week, haven't been called back yet. I don't know if the town's aware, but many years ago, the EPA considered making Worcester Sand and Gravel a Superfund site. So that tells you that the federal government at one point in time thought there was a problem. If you just have to Google it. There were blasting issues in the past, state fire marshal. Through the years, there have been numerous issues with that site. So it was not properly protected. I don't think that necessarily, somebody will have to clean it up. But just so Dean knows, it was considered a Superfund.
Mr. Byrne. Just Mr. Byrne first. I recognize him.
Kevin Byrne, Precinct 6. I move the question.
Is there a second? Follow up to what, though? The motion has been made, but wait a second. The motion has been made, it has been seconded, and therefore it preempts everything else. So the question before the body is whether or not they've had enough debate on Article 32. If you want to move the question, in this case, you would vote yes. All those in favor of voting to move ahead with a final vote, move the question on Article 32 shall signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. We now move to Article 32, which is a zoning article that requires 2/3 vote in the affirmative. Is everyone clear on what they're voting on? Very good. Then we will take the vote on Article 32. All those in favor of Article 32 shall signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. 2/3 is not achieved, and it does not win. The motion has been made for a standing vote. Do we have 7 who will stand with her? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Beautiful. We will now move to a standing vote. Tellers, please take your positions. Everyone stay seated until the tellers get in their positions, and then we will get underway with the standing vote. Are the tellers in position? Okay, folks, the way we do this for those who are new members, under a standing vote, the tellers are in position, and we will, folks, we will now ask that everyone who is in favor of Article 32 stand and be counted. And please remain counted until such time as the tellers have secured your vote.
Are you standing? Were you counted?
1.
9.
17.
13.
Please be seated. All of those, I'll let everybody get seated first. All of those in favor, opposed to Article 32, please rise. You got everybody? Get these two? I'm sorry, did you get these two? Okay.
21.
37.
32. 31.
You may be seated. Town meeting members, on this matter, 40 in the affirmative, 128 in the negative. Article 32 does not pass. Town meeting members, it is now 10:45. In accordance with our operating rules and long-held tradition, we may not take up any new article unless you decide otherwise. I suspect from the recent comments you are not in favor of staying. Therefore, Mr. Mizikar has advised me that this auditorium is available at 7 p.m. tomorrow evening, where we will reconvene and continue with our annual town meeting. Until such time, we stand adjourned.